Go. Greetings, my friends. I am Dictor Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth. And this afternoon, we have a very special treat in store for you all. One of the most popular live streams that I've ever been involved in was over with Viva and Barnes. And we were talking about, well, everything, a little bit of everything under the sun, particularly the influence of wokeness and SJW interlopers on our pop culture and why pop culture matters and so on and so forth. And I was really eager to go ahead and continue this dialogue. And I am very pleased to have that opportunity today, folks. We are here with none other than Viva and Barnes, and I'm going to bring them on right now without further ado. So I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, and aliens and other worldly beings, including robotic life forms, the one and only Viva Fry and Robert Barnes of Barnes Law. Greetings, gentlemen.
Happy to be here.
How's it going?
Well, it is going well, my friends. Welcome to Xanadoom. Now, you guys may not realize this, but you have been tranquilized and abducted and taken to the center of the earth in my lair. Now, to avoid undue distress or disorientation, as you can see, I have constructed natural habitats for each of you, native to your normal state, and seamlessly you have awakened in your environment, much like in 2001 when the astronaut winds up in a little, well, we won't call it a zoo. We'll call it a think tank. And you'll be returned to your normal environments at the end of this broadcast, assuming you don't make me angry. I'm just kidding. Welcome, guys. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Doomcock?
I am delighted to be here. I'm having a lot of fun already, as you can tell. It was a lot of effort to build you your little enclosures, but did I do a good job? You didn't even notice, did you?
I got the logo up here. I love this. This is beautiful.
Look at
on
that.
My hand the entire night.
No, man, it's like it's an honor. Now I'm gonna have to never wash that logo again. It's got Viva Fry's handprints on it, which is very, very much of an honor, and also could be useful someday if I ever need to frame someone else for a crime I committed. So welcome, Robert. How are you, man?
Filled with unbridled rage at the moment. So
yes.
I basically have a case, single mom and her daughter. Big case for them, small case overall in the sense of impact on the city. Sued some city cops that raided the wrong house, what they did, then tried to cover it up afterwards. And the lawyers for the city settled the case last week, and it now looks like it was a completely sham settlement that they never intended to settle, never were actually settling, didn't have settlement authority. Didn't have their clients even present, apparently, lied to the mediator, lied to everybody, solely to get a tactical edge in the case. And the settlement was very small. I mean, it's big to my client, but it's less than the cost of a conference retreat of the local city council. So they decided they're going to try to gain it. They used the settlement to try to gain an edge in discovery and an edge in summary judgment. And just as a tactical tool. Never seen it before in my life. In fact, researching case law, never seen it before in my life. But these are lawyers that should have, the anger is sort of my fuel. So I become a little bit like Hulk when I get enraged. And so it becomes consuming, subsuming. I haven't slept in the last 24 hours for the most part because this broke yesterday. And I become so laser focused, I can't even get off of it.
In a settlement, though, in theory, and I presume this is not the case now, but all discussions are confidential. Anything that is obtained through those discussions is confidential. Are they now purporting to use this or going to use it?
Just the opposite. They're using the fact that I can't disclose what they agreed to in the settlement the conversation that led to the agreement, that I can't use that against them. That's part of the scam. I mean, it's just a complete scam to pretend things didn't happen that did, to pretend the settlement isn't what it was. All city settlements in America have to be approved with formality by the city council, and they're hiding behind that as their pretext. And the thing is, I've dealt with lawyers and corrupt agents throughout my whole life. And in almost every single federal agency and branch of government, there's someone whose career I've helped ruin. And the DEA, IRS, FBI, Marshal Service, Diplomatic Security Service, ICE, HHS, CIA, you name it. There's in every agency I can point to someone whose career I set out to ruin because they try to scam like this on me. And these lawyers are going to find out what that's like, and these corrupt cops are going to find out what that's like. But other than that rage, I'm always happy to be on here with you, Doom Guy.
I am delighted, and I feel your rage, and I share it. My signature sign-off is "Stay angry," and that's one of the reasons why I wear my helmet whenever I watch Star Trek Discovery or Star Wars. It rockets my blood pressure to 430 over 300, and that keeps my head from exploding like in the movie Scanners. So I'm very grateful to have this helm. And Viva is also, very angry today, or at least filled with despair.
Someone accused me, or they didn't accuse me. Someone posted a comment on my video from yesterday saying, I seem consumed by hatred, or something along those lines. And I said, first of all, now I think they might have been totally joking, because at the end of the video, I'm like cradling my West Highland Terrier and smooching with him. And maybe it was ironic, but I took it seriously. And I'm not so enraged and I'm not so angry. What I am is just disappointed in our government and our country and the collective sentiment of people who have, without thought and without full reflection, sacrificed and abandoned their most fundamental rights and liberties for a semblance or a feeling of security, additional security. And people think that we're ever going to get these rights back. And some people think that we don't need to get these rights back, that, for the greater good, whatever that means, and everyone should just abandon any form of individualism, because now apparently individualism is totally selfish and totally evil. Whereas I don't think that people fully appreciate that the greater good might very well be preserving individualism. But what do I know? I'm gonna run upstairs and let a dog out so that he stops barking during the stream. 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Fortunately, I had my giant robots construct the entirety of his environment. So when he steps out, he won't step out into a volcanic void, which he otherwise is surrounded by. There we go.
I'm back.
But you anticipate me, Viva, because that's one of the things that we are actually going to talk about today is the devaluing and even vilification of the concept of individuality and individualism in these Disney training materials. This is really something, guys, and I really am honored to have you guys here today. And I had so much fun with you on our last appearance that I couldn't wait to have you back, and it couldn't be a better topic of discussion. To go ahead, just in case you guys aren't up on this leaked over on Twitter, and then later on picked up on a website. Training materials that the Walt Disney Company, excuse me, I had it right. The Walt Disney Company is basically subjecting their employees to, and some of the tenets of this training are absolutely unbelievable to me. I guess you guys will believe it because you've already given some instances of this kind of pernicious influence early on in the live stream. But if you'll beg your indulgence here for a second, I would like to kind of give you an overview of what's going on here. So basically, this was a scoop by a man named Christopher F. Rufo, and on Twitter, and he posted a string of tweets together with documentation about a program called Reimagine Tomorrow. What can I do about racism? An anti-racism discussion guide that was provided to employees with various challenges, and a white privilege checklist that included questions like, I am white, I am heterosexual, I am a man. I still identify as the gender I was born in. I have never been raped. I don't rely on public transportation. I have never been called a terrorist, etc., and so on. As you can imagine, it's a very fun checklist. But according to Christopher Rufo, and Disney has tried to say that he mischaracterized it, but my God, he has posted the actual screen grabs of the material itself. He says, the Walt Disney Corporation claims that America was founded on systemic racism, encourages employees to complete a white privilege checklist, and separates minorities into racially segregated affinity groups. According to a trove of whistleblower materials, Disney has launched a diversity and inclusion program called Reimagine Tomorrow, which includes trainings on systemic racism, white privilege, white fragility, white saviors, microaggressions, and anti-racism. Disney claims that America has a long history of systemic racism and transphobia and tells employees that they must, quote, take ownership of educating yourself about structural anti-Black racism and not rely on your Black colleagues to educate you, which is emotionally taxing. But it gets much, much worse. White employees are told to work through feelings of guilt, shame, and defensiveness to understand what is beneath them and needs to be healed. They must listen with empathy to Black colleagues, but not question or debate Black colleagues' lived experience. Disney tells employees, and this is the first thing I really want to talk about. Disney tells employees that they should reject equality or equal treatment, heaven forbid, and instead strive for equity or the equality of outcome. The equality of outcome. They must reflect on America's racist infrastructure and think carefully about whether or not their wealth is derived from racism. Gentlemen, I would like to put it to you. What do you guys think about this idea that equality and equal treatment is not enough, that we must instead aim for equality of outcome? I'll let's have Robert go ahead and start with that, if you would.
So, I mean, there's two problems with it. One is there's no consistent application of it. So, for example, feminists do not want equality of outcome in nursing careers or in teaching or a wide range of other areas where women overwhelmingly dominate. Do they want a bunch of women to be fired because there's too many women in those professions or occupations? The same is true in a wide range of other areas. Are we, for example, supposed to now purge the NBA of 90% of its players because 90% of them are African American? And hey, that's not equality of outcome. We need them to be 85% white. We need the 5'5", Central American to be included on the NBA team. I mean, these are principles they cannot even apply consistently. They're not only sort of impracticable, they're impossible to apply by their own standards and undesirable by their own sought objectives. So what they're really saying is in areas where we don't have as much power, that's where we want disproportionate influence, because they don't want like equality of outcome in a wide range of contexts whenever it disfavors them, which is many contexts. And so where they have disproportionate influence. Are we supposed to change musicians? You know what? There's too many African-American rap musicians. There's too many Latino singers of a particular kind. Too many Italian singers of a particular kind. We got to get rid of them and put, that 11th contestant on the last singing TV show and put them on instead because they fit whatever demographic is supposed to be there. So it's an absurd proposition by its very nature, by its very character. Now, putting that aside, the inherent irrationality of it is that constitutionally it is foreign to the American principle of equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. And the reason for that is that race or gender or status or sexual preference or religion or ancestry or national origin, none of these should be the basis by which you either obtain something or don't obtain something. And this is directly opposite to that. This is saying based on your racial, ethnic, or whatever status it is in the intersectional Olympics, on the pyramid of intersectional oppression, that you should be given a special protection for. And by the way, that undermines confidence in those who have rightly sought and obtained success in those fields. If you're Clarence Thomas, in the left in particular, by the way, will suggest that maybe you only got your position because of race, not because of your intellectual capability or your unique life experience or anything else, even though he's one of the most thoughtful justices on our entire Supreme Court for the last 20 years. So it doesn't achieve what they seek. It's completely foreign to the principles of American equality, that we do not see race, we do not see region, we do not see religion, we do not see gender. We do only see who you are as a human being. It's not just individuality. It's about seeing people as human beings. Earl Long had a great famous speech. Now, he used some colorful language we will not repeat on this show. But Uncle Earl was condemning other people who are racist. And he was talking about someday you're going to sit on the front of your roof of your car out picnicking, looking at the moon, and you're going to figure out everybody is a human being too. He used some other language, but, that was Uncle Earl. So that dynamic, that's why all of this is foreign. And that's why Disney had to lie about what was in there. They lied about Rufo. Full disclosure, I've told Rufo months before that I'll help him or these cases out in the critical race theory context, because I think it is not only anti-American, not only irrational, but it's actually anti-Black. Anti-Latino and anti-Asian. I don't think it promotes or protects the interest of individuals that have those traits or within those groups. I think that this is about white lefties wanting to create their little playpen of intersectional Olympics where they get to be the heroes at the end. It's like that meme where they take, what's her name? Cersei? No, not Cersei. The other one, Dany. They take Dany from Game of Thrones, another series completely ruined by incompetent woke. Well, that wasn't wokeism. That was just idiots, morons, imbeciles. But the people who should be purged from every writing or directing or being involved in anything ever again for the sake of humanity. But remember that picture where Dany is being carried by the slaves that she's freed? There's a great meme that says this is basically how white liberals say they perceive all the different oppressed groups, as pushing them up and praising them as the hero they want to be. That's what this is about. This is about rich white lefties feeling good about themselves. It is not about protecting or helping anybody, period.
Robert basically summarized everything I was going to say, and I just want to highlight that it's not just counterintuitive. It's not just potentially illegal. It's counterproductive because it doesn't do anything to amend or to mend, I should say, race relations. This just actually creates a greater divide than you could ever possibly imagine. On the one hand, it gets everyone looking at themselves to say, how can I qualify myself as someone who has been victimized or oppressed? And it's this ridiculous dissection where you say, okay, white males, but white males not if you're gay, white males not if you identify as something else. So really, white males, but not if you're Catholic in a Protestant environment or Protestant in a Catholic environment. White males, but not if you're an English white male in Quebec, a French province, or depending on your religion. It's just everyone goes around looking for how they can purport to be the victim and how they can look at someone else as the victimizer. And these policies just cause everyone to look for divide, to look for oppression, and to look for having been oppressed so they can blame someone else for something. And it's predicated, I think, fundamentally on wrong principles. Everyone talks about systemic racism in the United States, and they ignore the fact that the United States was the first country in the world to fight against racism in a proactive way and sacrifice their own citizens in this fight, compared to all the other countries out there which did much less until more recently. And so it's fundamentally flawed on what it's premised on, and it's flawed in its objective, and it's flawed in the outcome. It's not going to create any kumbaya, everyone holding hands. It's just going to make everyone look at everyone else like they're an oppressor in one way or another. And it really, I hate listening to it. This is not the right direction for anything resembling a cohesive society.
And
I agree.
The same network that, by the way, just briefly, the same network that fired the most badass woman character in the last 20 years. And they're going to be on the gender bandwagon?
And Robert, let me just throw my own prime minister under the bus here. Our prime minister, who is the wokest person on earth, talks about people kind, talks about systemic racism, seemingly confessing for his own sins. He's the one who was caught wearing brown face or blackface, however you want to call it. Whether or not you have a problem with it, by his own standards, he's guilty of it. He professes himself to be a champion of women's rights, Aboriginal rights, and he fires the first Aboriginal woman attorney general that he hired because she refused to follow his corrupt orders to not criminally prosecute a company that was neck deep in corruption. And so for whatever the reason, the irony in all of this is it's always the people throwing out the accusations, complaining about systemic racism, that lo and behold have the most systemically racist history and past and sins of their own. And it's just confession through projection. It's just projection, period, that they are trying to force other people to be guilty of their own sins. And I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. Anybody calls me racist, it is because they are racist and they're trying to exploit of racism to demonize their adversaries. And I found it to be pretty much the standard MO in politics and on social media. The people making the accusations invariably turn out to be the racists, and they do it to weaponize minorities for their own political and virtue gain.
I agree. And I, always try to bring things back to the level of pop culture because that's kind of my primary concern. I'm down here, you're working on an elevated plane and I'm down in the trenches of what people review or consider to be junk culture, pop culture, but really as above, so below, as the old maxim goes. And I think that, pop culture is like kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to a lot of these issues, because they kind of want to topple the wonderful mythologies and morality tales and things that characterize our civilization. Things like Star Trek, things like Star Wars, and so on. But I think a wonderful illustration of what you're talking about, you guys, is The Expanse. I don't know if you guys have seen The Expanse, but one of the great problems with these social justice warriors on Twitter, and Gen Z in general, generally speaking, I mean, there's some good Gen Z people out there, don't get me wrong, but The Expanse is a show that walks the walk. It doesn't just talk the talk. It actually doesn't lecture about, racial issues or sexism or anything. It doesn't hammer people over the head. It is not interested in the kind of virtue signaling that characterizes, I think, this Disney training manual, because obviously Disney does not believe in equality of outcome. I mean, let's get real. It just shows a better world. It illustrates a better world where racism and sexism are no longer even. There is conflict, and it's more between people who are, belters working in space, the native or Earth people that colonize Mars, and then the Martians that have developed their own culture. So it's all a kind of a cultural and a values kind of a struggle rather than anything sexual or racial. There's no transphobia. There's no homophobia. It's just really a lot better world than what we've got, even with all the violence and everything. And the key difference between that and say something like Star Trek Discovery is Star Trek Discovery is so high on their own woke farts that they simply cannot stop crowing about, we're the first to do this. We're the first to do this. We're the first to do this. And in every case, it's a lie, because other shows, better shows, have done it all before them. They just didn't mouth off about it. So this is really the problem, is that these techniques and these people are not really interested in creating a colorblind future where everyone is equal, regardless of their race or their sex or their sexual orientation. No, they want to proudly proclaim themselves as champions of these things while condemning anybody else that deviates in any way from the acceptable norms that they're trying to establish. And this is really the core of the problem. I've actually heard young people saying, you know what? Why don't we try communism? It's like, it's been tried, you idiots. What do you think the Cold War was all about? But because it happened before they were born, they don't have any sense of it, and they don't value it because they're essentially narcissistic. So nothing that happened before they were born. I'm becoming Seinfeld here. Nothing that happened before they were born matters at all.
That's actually a very good Seinfeld impersonation. No, but it's the no true communist fallacy. It's like, yeah, it wasn't done properly then. It wasn't done properly then. And the irony it seems to be a certain status of society that has the luxury of imposing communism on the rest. And people think that even in communist societies, you don't have a hierarchy of the political class versus the lowly hoi polloi. It just changes the way you classify society, but it brings everyone down as opposed to bringing, the lower bottom up. There's a reason why it has not yet worked. Might be fundamentally flawed.
Well, it's basically a big struggle between what I consider humanism and anti-humanism, because it's not just the individual versus the collective, the autonomy of the person versus the state or the system. It's people who believe in humanity, period, who value or who are humanitarian in origin and focus, and consider the fact that a person is a human being more important than anything else. Any status, any identification, anything else that could be attributed to them or allocated to them, that sees the value in that person as a person. Hence, that's what the civil rights movement was about. I am a man. That was the slogan and the signs they carried at Martin Luther King's march in 1963. And it was a universalist message. And what we see in art, particularly popular art, desired art, sustainable art that's successful over centuries, is art that is humanitarian in origin, that tells a story about the human being that every human being experiences or can relate to in some way. And that's what Disney's supposed to be in the business of. They're supposed to be in the business of telling the human story in ways that's universal and accessible over generations, over decades, ultimately, ideally, over centuries, if it is good art. But instead, they're doing propaganda. In propaganda, whether in the name of the state, the name of a cause, the name of a religion, the name of a race, and the name of whatever, is almost always crap art. It may be technologically good, but it's not going to be a good story. The Birth of a Nation isn't a good story. It's a crap story. Griffith developed some really impressive technological techniques, just like the Nazis did, but their stories were crap. Almost every Soviet film was crap. Almost every communist film was crap. And that's because they're not telling the human story, and they're anti-human by origin. They want to reduce the human being to being some tool of some other cause, some other agenda, some other objective. And what they do in Expanse is they just create a universe of human beings. And what's interesting about them is what they do, what their life experience is, and their cultural background, but not there's some status about them. The fact that they're a woman is coincidental. The fact that they may be white or black is coincidental. The fact they may be gay is coincidental. It's not causative. It's not determinative. They're not reduced, because that's what all of these causes are. They're reductionistic. They reduce the human being to something else. They treat the human being as something else. They just become a different version of martyr or sin goat, like the human sacrifices of old, from older, darker societies and civilizations. And so, I think that's why Expanse is fantastic, top notch, because they're telling a human story, not an anti-human story. But half of what Disney's putting out is anti-human, and half of whatever Hollywood is putting out is anti-human. And that's why you're seeing ordinary people reject it and rebel against it.
And that's amazing. Anti-human, and in the sense that it objectifies every individual to certain immutable traits, and it creates the world in which you are looking at individual and not seeing an individual. You are only seeing the immutable traits that you can, weaponize or use to define as the essential traits of that person. And it's, the idea that it's the perspective that all roads lead to racism, because if you don't see the color and you don't see the gender and you don't see other issues, you're ignoring them, and it's discriminatory. And if you do see them, you're focusing on them. It's discriminatory. And it is true. It is objectification as opposed to unification, and reducing the individual to these superficial traits as opposed to celebrating the individual for the individual themselves. And the movie The Jerk, this is where my culture started and probably ended. But The Jerk is the best example of something that could never be made today and only defeating the purpose. What made The Jerk the beautiful film that it was is its unifying message of an individual who didn't see these things that the racists around him saw. And all that we have today is a form of progressive racism, which is, it's racism, but it's for the greater good, or for what people are saying is the greater good, which is equality of outcome, if that's even what they're after. But that doesn't seem what they're after. What they're after, in my mind, really is only elevating themselves on the virtue scale, and not about unifying anybody. And it's just so easy to do. You elevate yourself on this virtue scale by causing infighting among everyone below you, and you don't have to worry about it.
But
yeah,
it's
if
not
Kathleen
only
Kennedy
that.
believed any of this crap, she should resign today and promote a black transgendered man. So why is she holding down the other races? Why is she holding down the other sexual preferences by staying in her position? Why is she staying in her white privilege status? Resign today, give up your house, move to the shack, and give up your positions to someone else like you claim to believe in, that you want everyone else to believe in. You fake, you phony, you fraud of a human being.
Well, that is really kind of the first thing that I thought, Robert, when I saw this and I heard about equality of income. I tweeted out something to the effect of, well, you know, this equality of outcome concept leads me to ask, does this mean that Bob Iger is going to give everyone at Disney a raise up to his salary level? Or is Iger going to take a paycheck to match the rest of his employees? That really is the issue, because it's not merely racial and everything. They're talking about equality of outcome fiscally. In really, they don't limit it in any way. And this kind of thing is absolutely impossible, but they are virtue signaling their asses off about it and creating, in calling out these things, more division and deeper division than originally existed. It'll be a surprise to you guys, maybe, that I am not only a supervillain, but I am also something of a philosopher. I have studied philosophy for decades now, particularly Eastern philosophy. And, you know, it's interesting, the kind of parallels that run through reality. The Vedantists, generally called Hindus, but it's a specific outcome of the world. They see everything as non-dual. In other words, there are no divisions. All divisions are illusory, because it's all essentially, as Bill Hicks said, you know, God experiencing the world subjectively, playing all the parts, and not knowing that all along that there are no divisions. To see divisions is what the Hindus refer to as Maya, which is basically magic or illusion. That all these divisions are illusory and are symptomatic of people who are in general unenlightened. And we have the same case here, that these people, in seeing divisions everywhere they look, are sowing division, and they are deeply dividing people into categories. This Disney training divides people into categories, which is, I think, absolutely astonishing. You know, they've put them into black people, Hispanic people. They have a group of Asian people, and white people are shit out of luck, because, of course, you know, we are responsible for everything that is wrong in the world historically. And what these guys don't seem to understand is that basically, if you have any group that it's okay to shit on, then there is racism sown. I mean, you know, it almost turns racism into a relay race, where right now one side of the coin has the stick and is running with it, but it's going to come around the track, and then they're going to hand that stick of racism, which they've carefully preserved by making everybody else acceptable except a certain demographic, i.e., in general, cis white males, as they like to put it. It's okay to shit on cis white males, and it's okay to discriminate against them, and they deserve everything that they get. Well, that baton is going to come around, and all the cis white males that have been shit on all this time are going to be in no mood for kumbaya stuff. And thus, this horrible cycle of abuse and racism and sexism gets passed around, and we never get rid of it. To get rid of it, we've got to condemn it in every single instance. We cannot be obsessed with the wrongs of the past and in somehow getting revenge or retribution for those wrongs. We've got to care more about human beings, as individuals, which is antithetical to what these people are concerned with. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But this is really a very sad thing to see, that I think that the struggle, the righteous struggle, the appropriate struggle for equality and respect and regard for all human souls, is being set back by a bunch of clowns tweeting in their jams on their couches about, social justice, and just waiting for the chance to spring and cancel and condemn anybody that doesn't conform to their philosophy to feel better about themselves. Isn't that more or less the situation, or have I missed something?
Robert, you want to field this one?
Sure. Well, I mean, basically, it's white liberals walking on the backs of black men, walking on the backs of black women, walking on the backs of Latinos for their own self-aggrandizement and their own empowerment. Because, as you note, the first thing is they're all hypocrites. Well, whenever anyone has told me they believe in any of this nonsense, including even family members, I've said that some nieces in particular and nephews and what have you, I've said start with yourself. To tell you any of your friends who believe this, start with yourself. If you really oppose this white privilege, okay, give up your position in your college. Are you at Prestige? Are you at a premier liberal arts college? Give it up right now. Give it up. Not only that, give up where you live. Go move into the public housing projects. Go live in a marginal part of the neighborhood and community. Go work as a waitress someplace. If you're serious, I mean, give up. Why are you stealing these other people's deserved positions by using and abusing your privilege? Not one of them will do it. They're all frauds. They're all fakes. They're all phonies. So that's the first thing about and that tells you they're wanting to use other people as a stepping stone. It's like, even though I hate the Barat guy, he actually did when he came over as the gay guy, the character where he ended up, hiring Mexicans to sit on them because that's how he understood certain parts of liberal American culture. That part was actually revelatory and comedic because that's really what they do. They want a bunch of groups of lower status to use them as stepping stones for their own empowerment. That's what this is all about. It's what the government does in general on the left. That's why they can never change or improve poverty rates in the inner city or other places, because the moment they do, they're no longer needed. Their jobs are no longer needed. Their status is no longer needed. Their power is no longer needed. So they need to keep these people down in order to keep themselves up. And that's what it's all about. And the hypocrisy just blatantly exposes it, as well as the internal contradictions of their own policies. And so I think that's absolutely true. And you just see it at a whole different level in Hollywood. I mean, in Hollywood, it's just egregious. None of these big directors that are pushing wokeism are giving up their own director's gig. None of these CEOs are giving up their own CEO gig. Bob Iger ain't moving into South Central or East LA anytime soon. Bob Iger ain't giving up his home. He ain't giving up his car. He ain't giving up his assistants. He ain't giving up his vacations. And he ain't giving up all his stock options, which he has unfortunately continued to damage by his incompetency and ineptitude. But that's another story.
No, but it is the ultimate hypocrisy, and you can tell the hypocrisy when people are promoting policies that they themselves do not and would not follow. And it's at all levels. Like, I know it's easy. The political left is the easy target for this now. But you got John Kerry talking about environmentalism and then flying around on a private jet because he needs it. Same thing with Leonardo DiCaprio. Same thing with all of our politicians here. You got all of Hollywood who are vehemently anti-Second Amendment, who have their own security guards. They're anti-walls and anti-borders, and yet lived in gated communities. And so you have them promoting these virtuous theories and principles that they themselves don't follow, which is a good indication that if it's not good enough for them, that it probably is not good enough for the rest of the people. And even if there is some inequality in outcome, it's the equality, the opportunity that it should apply to everybody. That is the actual valuable thing. But it's easier for those who are, sitting in the castles to say, for everyone else, equal opportunity, but I'm not contributing my own. I'm not sacrificing myself to that. I expect everyone else to sacrifice themselves to the principle that I set that I don't follow.
Yeah.
These dogs are driving me crazy today. I don't know what the deal
That's all right. I love animals, but I got to say that, my primary focus again on this is how it explains and impacts our pop culture. This kind of essentially what they're doing is viewing things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, not as narratives anymore, but as platforms to enforce a certain amount of propaganda and change. And that is really the reason. I mean, you alluded to this earlier, Robert, is that the art coming out of like the Soviet Union and China and so on is not inspiring because it is largely propagandistic. It is not driven by telling human stories of human passions and so on. It's really disheartening to say that the people in charge have custodianship over our modern myths, because make no mistake, that's what these things have become elevated to. Things like Superman, Batman are all modern myths, embodying examples on what it's like to be decent, what it's like to be moral, what it's like to be a man, what it's like to care about justice. But none of these things matter to these people. They just want to go ahead and make statements along these lines of racial division that doesn't help anyone and just pisses people off. And I find it very disturbing. Also disturbing, guys, I want to call your attention to something else that was in this document, this document leak, that was saying basically participants are told in this training at Reimagine Tomorrow at Walt Disney World that they must pivot from white dominant culture to, quote, something different. And the document claims that things like competition, individualism, timeliness, and comprehensiveness are white dominant values that perpetuate white culture. So individualism and competition in these training materials, gentlemen, are to be vilified and are held up as problematic in this training. What in God's name do you think of a system that wants to eliminate competition and individualism? It sounds like something, I don't know, somebody named Marx might have written about at some point.
It's beyond that. This is fundamentally insulting and racist. This is soft racism, soft bigotry through low expectations. I mean, they're basically saying that the things that they place value on, they don't think other cultures are capable of achieving. I mean, it is so egregiously racist, the implications, what they're implying by this policy, that I'm not black, I'm not an ethnic minority, but if I were of a minority, I would be insulted that they're looking at me and saying, these are not white traits. Competition, individualism are not. First of all, the fact that you think that there's supremacy, that says something about what you think about all other cultures. And what that says in terms of what you think is that you think other cultures are inferior, and you are in fact the one, through these suppositions, admitting your own implicit racism and discrimination against these cultures, which you consider to be beneath your own. It's over the top. It's over the top.
Well, it's what my Native American law professor, who's politically on the left, but not in certain categories, as he often said in law school. He said the worst thing that ever happened to the rights of Native Americans in the United States were Indian-loving liberals, and that was his terminology. He goes, if you think my father doesn't value property, like a part of the Indian liberal sort of Indian-loving liberal mythology, he goes, why don't you try to walk across his backyard late at night, and you're going to see what he thinks about property. You're going to see what he thinks about self-defense. You're going to see what he thinks about gun rights, as long as you live. So this is part of that same extenuation. Viva's absolutely right. This is extraordinary racism. I mean, they've just recast it and redrafted it. And the way, Christopher Lasch, great writer for anybody out there, The Revolt of the Elites, True and Only Heaven, a range of books he wrote in the 90s before he passed on untimely. And he came originally from the Frankfurt Marxist school. And he shifted because he studied what was happening to family life. And that was one of his revolutionary moments, to realize the inherent flaws of Marxism and reductionism. And one of his conclusions as he went along in this sort of study, is sort of a great intellectual architect and advocate of a certain kind of populism, but down deep, just humanitarianism. That's what draws it all together, thematically and structurally. And he pointed out that one of the most vicious forms of racism or prejudice is pity. If you feel pity towards a group, what you're really doing is you feel contempt. And you're disgracing. Oh, you can't do it. You're not good enough. You're a victim. You're too weak. You're too inept. Your race makes you unable to understand competition. Really, your gender, your national origin means you don't even know what it means to compete, which is absurd on its face. But it's incredibly insulting. And it's something that's why when wokeism is tested amongst the groups it's purportedly helping, those groups disproportionately report they reject it. I mean, again, the civil rights movement was I am a man. Not I'm not sure if I'm a man. I don't know if I'm a man. I don't know whether God made me a man or not. It was I am a man, and that was it. And I should be treated as a human being. These people are anti-civil rights at heart. They're anti-civil liberties at heart. They're anti-Martin Luther King. That's why they attack Martin Luther King. That's why Martin Luther King is not part of their Mount Rushmore of ideas. Instead, Marx and other people are put up there. And Marx himself, study his personal history and see if you want to replicate that guy. So, I mean, there's the nature of this, not only the moral hypocrisy, the moral degeneracy of these ideas, but that at core, they're racially insulting. They're insulting to wide ranges of people. They're something we would quickly identify as racism just a decade or two ago. And they're being propounded, promoted, and being taught. And that's why what Disney is doing is illegal under California law. And that's why they had to lie about Christopher Rufo rather than admit what they're doing, because they know what they're doing is a bunch of racist mumbo jumbo that is nothing more than recycled racism from a century ago, just now being done in the name of helping the people they're supposedly that they are in fact insulting.
That is one of the things I wanted to ask you guys about, the kind of legality of all of this. And it sounds like you've already given that some thought. Just for the record, the way that I work things is, I try to unite people, oddly enough. I'm a weird supervillain in that way. I do try to unite people. I try to make sure that people on all ends of the political spectrum feel welcome to enjoy pop culture, because, regardless of what party or belief somebody has, if anybody across a room that flashes the Vulcan salute to me is my brother or sister, and I love them, and that's how it is. And I frequently feel, because I know my audience and my legionnaires and so on, they are on the left and the right agree that these things are excessive and are hurting our culture and pop culture and so on. I think that the real enemy is extremism on both ends of the spectrum, honestly, because they're the ones that are the loudest. They're the ones that are really sowing all the divisions and dominating the conversation, when mostly centrist and reasonable people are just trying to live their lives and enjoy their stuff.
Doomcock, you're right. I mean, you're right. Extremism on both sides is always the problem. And there are going to be people who say that's just equivocating. It's a matter of fact. Extremism on both sides is the problem. The bigger problem, however, is that when it comes to media extremism, 90% of the media is of one political side. Mm-hmm. So
that's true.
Both extremists are bad, yes, except when the majority of the media is the extremists on one side of the political aisle. While extremism is bad in general, it just so happens there's more of a certain political aligned extremism in media, and is the same in Hollywood. And so you have this elite, I would call them the elitists, and not necessarily the extremists, but the elitists promoting this extreme view, which is just as bad as everyone on the other side who says effectively the same things, incidentally, that these other cultures and races are not capable of the same thing as the white supremacist master race. It's just that the elitists in Hollywood are saying it in a much more veiled and insulting way, as opposed to the extremists on the right. And it just so happens that the Hollywood elitists have much more power, not necessarily much more numbers, but they have much more power and influence in their scope and reach into mainstream society, which is why it's so much more not sinister, but rather damaging. What they're doing is that it creates this mainstream idea that you have to eliminate competition for equality, where it's nothing shy of a form of supremacy, just veiled in pity. And so all that say, I wouldn't call them extremists, but they are elitists with a very large scope of influence, which makes it even more dangerous.
But it's these people, it is the extremists that limit our ability to discourse intelligently and dispassionately about these things, when they are calling people like me, who have been lifetime Star Trek fans, lifetime Star Trek fans, ists and phobes and all sorts of horrible names, Yahtzees and what have you. How can you be any of those things if you love Gene Roddenberry's universe of almost utopian brotherhood, not extended merely to different races and different sexes, but to alien beings that don't resemble humans in any way? I do not understand this, but of course it's anti-rational. And that's one of the most dangerous aspects of all of this, is the abandonment of things like truth and reason and fact as bases for debate. When you just can be shut down with a label of an ist or phobe or what have you, you are basically being canceled as a sovereign human being with your own divine spark of logic and reason. Like, basically, you just throw out that ist or phobe label, and anything that you say at that point is completely invalid. And that is how people who cannot debate stifle debate, because it doesn't further their aims. In the same way that, I have also had a lifetime interest in unidentified flying objects and things like that. But and now the government, of course, has come out and said, well, we've got video of these things. We don't know what they are, and they've been around a long time. Okay, and now COVID, and you people are distracted. But they've always shut down people who are genuinely interested in inquiring into this phenomenon with the label conspiracy theorist. And it's the same thing with ist and phobe. It's just a way to end a conversation by applying a label, a simplistic label, to a complex analysis. And I find it the worst thing of all. Go ahead, sir.
I got to say this, Robert, you're going to get a kick out of this. The leader of the NDP party in Canada, which is the New Democratic or the National Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, he has a sound clip going viral where he equated people's questioning or reluctance to wear a face mask to right-wing extremism. I swear to you, he literally said there's a correlation between selfishness and not wanting to wear the face mask or questioning it and extreme right-wing extremism. And it has become so reflexive, it's comedic but tragic at the same time, because other people run with it. If you protest the lockdowns, you're a right-wing extremist, which makes you a white Yahtzee or whatever they want, a white nationalist. It's just become par for the course for political discourse, for social discourse. The power lies in the accusation, but that was the next level absurdity of the accusation in Canada. If you're anti-mask, you're a right-wing extremist. Nuts.
I mean, it's fascinating at both levels. I mean, at one level, that the great advantage of good art is that it reminds people of the universal nature of the human experience to overcome racism and prejudice and sexism and every other form of prejudice that may exist. It was recognizing the universal human traits in someone that allowed people to get past and beyond and often feel ashamed of whatever prejudice they had. And they're now trying to reinvigorate that prejudice in the name of art. And the other aspect of it is to suppress dissident information of any kind by either labels or by association. And so you're seeing with the labels, different labels. Sometimes it's phobe this, ist this, and all the rest. But other times it's things like, for example, Gamergate is a classic example of that. Gamergate had nothing to do with feminism and women's rights. Gamergate was about the corruption of journalists in the gaming industry and the comic industry. The same thing happens now. Like, I was on Geeks and Gamers have their own locals page now. And I was on there because I was so annoyed that I couldn't find a good film or TV show that I hadn't heard of or watched yet. And then if I went by any of the recommendations of the Rotten Tomatoes Hollywood crowd, the gatekeeper crowd, I would likely get a crap film, a crap show, and that they would promote it and propagate it solely because they liked its politics. I mean, what they've done to Doctor Who, what they've done to Star Trek, what they've done to Star Wars is just an abomination. They've taken the canon. I'm just waiting for them to write a new Old Testament. And, all of a sudden, make Eve a male-female hybrid character. I mean, this is disgraceful what they've done to the canon of modern culture. And they've done so in an anti-human way to promote an anti-human agenda that at core is anti-American as well.
Well said. And I would also add that there is a very cynical component to this in terms of corporations, because, this really started. I mean, ground zero of this was Ghostbusters 2016, where basically they stunt cast 4 women in the place of, Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and the rest of those guys as Ghostbusters. And they picked up on the resistance to that, and they said, hey, we've got an opportunity here. We can go ahead and neutralize any criticism of our film not being funny, which, dear God in heaven, it was not funny. And they can go ahead and say, well, anybody that didn't laugh at this, anybody that didn't like this, anybody that didn't support this is an hysterophobe, and they are revealing deep-seated personal problems and prejudices by rejecting Ghostbusters 2016. In other words, they're hiding behind the skirts of wokeism to go ahead and deflect magically any criticism, just aesthetic criticism of their movies. And thus, I think the corporations, Hollywood is particularly, has always hated the fact that the consumer can talk back and they can go ahead and complain about the swill that's being slopped into their troughs, and not eat them like good little piggies and consumers. They hate that. And so now, Star Trek Discovery, same thing. Mikey Spock is written as a plank of wood, This is a terrible, terrible character. The show hasn't had one single good moment on it in 3 years. I'm not lying. One single good moment. But anytime you say anything about it, you are dismissed with the label, and thus Hollywood feels empowered to not really worry about such troublesome things as quality anymore. Do you see?
Well, I mean, it's two different aspects. It's the failure it's the elite objection to the democratization of culture. They don't want the fans to be able to control and impact what they make. And they want the fans to be irrelevant. Now, the problem they have is that ends up showing up in their pocketbook, so they got to get ways around it. And their goal was to guilt and shame people into watching crap, not just celebrating crap and lying to people about it, which is what the reason why the gamer media, the entertainment media is as disgraced, disliked, and distrusted as the political media and the legal media is because they're liars. They lie repeatedly in the name of political propaganda. And people catch on to it. It's why you can't trust the Rotten Tomatoes review. You can't trust any mainstream institutional establishment review. If they say the film is good, it probably isn't. If they say the film is bad, it probably is. I mean, it's extraordinary the degree to which that has become the functional reality. But I think it's part of a broader piece and part of a broader story. Their obsession with power, even at the expense of profit, which is the other real shock with Hollywood. Their willingness to, Kathleen Kennedy has done more damage to a single brand than any human being in modern film cinematic history. I don't know of anyone else who's been as a disastrous debacle as she is. In a real world, her career would have been summarily executed and she would have been publicly shamed like the cultural leper that she is. They would have put her outside, isolated her, not let anybody get near her or her ideas. And yet that's where we live, because there's this disconnect between what the people want and what is in the human being's interest and what's in these corrupt, politicized elites' interest.
The differential in Rotten Tomatoes between some of these political movies as to the critics' reviews and the audience reviews are stunning. But Doomcock, you're right. And Robert, there is this idea that they have shamed people into feeling compelled to watch crap so as not to be called an ist. And I had this very same conversation with someone who I consider to be smarter than me at the time about Blackish. I don't know if you guys watched that show, but I used to be heavily into that show. I loved it. First seasons was hilarious. And then at one point, and I think it was 2016, it became such political crap, which would have been bad enough. But then it just became militant in its underlying racial message, to the point where it's like, I get nothing out of watching this. I just get frustrated. I don't find it funny anymore. And then someone said, well, you're not supporting Blackish and you're not supporting that community. I was like, first of all, I'm not pitting that community either. I'm not going to watch it, even though I hate it, just to give them a consolation prize. And also, I don't need to be subjected to that which is no longer funny, and shaming me into doing it is not going to make me do it anymore. But it is an amazing thing. With Ghostbusters, which I have not seen, but I've read as many reviews as I can, you know, they were shaming people out of criticizing it. I remember at the time, they were shaming people out of criticizing it and virtually shaming people into going to go watch it, because if you don't watch it, and if you don't go watch it and say you liked it, you must be a racist, you must be a misogynist, and your opinion is otherwise invalid. But it's an amazing thing.
The other thing with that is they're also stripping women. I think it's anti-feminist. Not only are they stripping women of biological status mattering in the world because suddenly a man can be a woman. There's that problem, which is deeply anti-feminist. But they're also stripping women of the ability to be heroes in any of these movies or shows. I mean, the Star Wars Disney trilogy could have been, maybe it wouldn't have been great. It still could have had an actual feminist hero in the lead women character, but they don't allow that to happen because the women can never lose. They can definitely never lose to another man. You can't really have a woman beat up another woman because that undermines women. So consequently, they can't have a hero arc. They're denied a hero arc. You could have had this great Star Wars feminist iconic hero that was still good artistically, but more importantly, was a real hero that people would attach to, that people would want to buy the little dolls for. But you couldn't because wokeism doesn't allow it. Wokeism is anti-woman at heart, because not only is it anti-women by promoting the idea that anybody can be a woman and that gender's in your head, but which is completely contrary to every feminist ideology that exists. And the entire foundation of feminism disappears the moment a gender is whatever somebody thinks they are on a given day. But the second corollary problem, just as significant, is now women don't have any heroes. Girls don't have any heroes to look up to because fake heroes, propaganda type heroes, are not heroes. They studied years ago. The reason why the fairy tales of the Grimm brothers were so popular is because it reflected humanitarianism. They went through variations of the hero arc. They went through real problems. It allowed children to externalize the bad feelings that they were feeling. The fairy tales where everything's perfect, kids don't like. Nobody likes those kind of stories. So by denying women the ability to have the hero's arc, down deep, wokeism is anti-feminist at heart and is undermining the cause and interest of women as well.
Well, absolutely. I would add to that what you said. I mean, all of that is true. But I would also add that the feminist virtues that are being extolled in all of these movies, like Captain Marvel, Star Trek Discovery, and so on, it's essentially writing women with masculine traits of aggression, violence, and, smart-assery.
Vindictiveness might have been what you were looking for too.
Vindictiveness.
Basically what they're saying is that the only good woman is a man in disguise.
Exactly correct. What about the feminine virtues of wisdom, of patience, of forbearance, of courage? These are equally valuable traits. I do not feel that those traits are any less than the masculine traits of aggression, violence, and so on and so forth. And it really is doing women a disservice by basically presenting them with role models that are men in feminine garb. This is not right. Captain Marvel, by God, she's just a nasty, vindictive, mean-spirited person. That there was one scene cut from the main movie, but it was on the extras, where she gets off, she goes out to a bar. She's looking for information, and there's a biker sitting out front, leaning on his motorcycle, and he says, hey, he kind of hits on her. He says, could you give me a smile and stuff like that? And what does it get him? She goes and she basically breaks his arm and steals his bike. And this was viewed as righteous. This was viewed as good.
Well, I'll say, so did that incompetent rube legal eagle thought that was okay. That disgrace of a human being. But I will say, in their defense, her character being nasty, vicious, mean, and dumb probably did fit Brie Larson in real life.
I cannot speak to that. I was just going to make the same reference to Legal Eagle, who said that was, could be legitimate self-defense. But it's an interesting thing, Doomcock. Yes, I did not see Captain Marvel. I did analyze that scene. But yeah, vindictive and remorseless, and these are the heroes. And the same thing in Ghostbusters. I forget her name now, but the woman who said after he falls out the window, he wasn't Ghostbusters material. I mean, it is an amazing thing to have. They're not supposed to be anti-heroes either. They're just supposed to be the heroes, the main characters, the people to look up to, displaying fundamental character flaws in the name of vengeance and in the name of getting back at the oppressors and what Hollywood is pushing. It's the wrong lesson to learn.
It really is. I'm going to get to some super chats here, guys, because I know that our audience wants to, pose some questions to you guys and make some comments. But I would like to end with this. Robert, the point that you were making earlier. It turns out that in WandaVision, which was the Disney Plus show featuring the Vision and Wanda Maximoff from the movies Avengers, they were slated to have Doctor Strange appear in that series and really kind of bring an end to it and be a really powerful motivator behind the whole thing. But they decided at the last minute, Kevin Feige admitted that they went ahead and cut Doctor Strange because they didn't want him detracting from Wanda and her mission, which was basically a tacit confession that Doctor Strange is a better character than Wanda Maximoff, in the same way that in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, they had to kill Han, they had to humiliate Luke Skywalker, and they had to basically kill Leia too, in order to make their Tiny Toons, Rey, Finn, and Poe stand up and have some kind of presence next to these towering giants. They really want to tear down greatness to elevate mediocrity. They want to kill individuality to elevate the kind of hive-mindedness that these Gen Zers find sanctuary in. Because, anybody that stands up above the crowd needs to meet Madame Guillotine. Isn't that right?
Yeah, well, you're telling me that that character wasn't the bestest ever?
The bestest ever was, of course, Mikey Spock. But Rey in the Star Wars universe was the bestest ever, as Captain Marvel now is also the bestest ever. Speaking of which, every time I see an ad for that HBO show, The Nevers, I say, as in, I'm never going to watch it. I feel much better about that.
By the way, Doomcock, I haven't been able to see the chat. So anybody who I typically read the chat, now I've got my phone set up so I can see the chats. But anyone wondering why I have not directly responded to any chat, I haven't seen them until now. Now I'm going to multitask.
Absolutely. And I will go ahead and feel free to type in here. I'm going to go ahead and start reading the super chats. And thank you all for, supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. And in general, when I'm alone, I get to everything in as timely a manner as possible. But of course, we have guests here today, so my attention is a little bit split. Please don't be offended, anybody. But I want to include everyone in this wonderful discussion. I'm having a blast. I hope you guys are too. And here we go. Saloso with a very generous $19.99 super chat. Thank you, Saloso. Says, hail chat and hail Doomcock. This is going to be amazing. What are you, Kreskin? Of course. You called it exactly. You're psychic, Saloso. Thank you. Perpetual Punster with a $10 super chat. Thank you, my dear friend and legionnaire, Perpetual Punster. Says, hail, Viva, Barnes, Overlord, Wrenches, and chat. Go do that voodoo that you do so well. We are. I think we're working voodoo. You can do magic. You can do anything that you desire. And we are today. Oh God, the chat just reset itself. I hate it when it does that. Does it do that to you guys?
Yes. And then you can't get some of the chats that have disappeared off the screen, depending on what software you're using. But, and incidentally, Doomcock, Robert, my video today is going to be on Sarah Silverman calling Caitlyn Jenner transphobic. And this is the backwards world that we live in, where 4 years ago, or 6 years ago, was it? Caitlyn Jenner was, declared Woman of the Year by, I think it was Time Magazine. And now, because Caitlyn Jenner, who was an Olympic athlete, might know something about sports and biology and how it could affect sports, is now being deemed transphobic because of her position on transgender women in biological women's sports or XXX sports. This is how the world changes, where the very people who are promoting this equal outcome woke ideology will tolerate and objectify the people who they need to promote their theories until they no longer agree with them, and then they throw them under the bus and call them the phobes and the ists and whatever. But stay tuned, everybody, for that vlog. It's coming out tonight.
And basically, Handmaid's Tale is all confession through projection. That they're wokesters who really want to be those characters in Handmaid's Tale.
I got to watch that. Someone was saying that what's going on in Canada is the manifestation of the Handmaid's Tale, and I have not seen one episode, so that might be next on my to-watch list.
I read the book, and it's just so relentlessly gloomy and disturbing that I don't want to watch it. I mean, I don't want to live in Gilead. I don't want to see women for breeding stock. It's just. I'm a romantic at heart, for God's sakes. My favorite movie is Casablanca. I didn't know if you.
Great film, great film, and all the juke joints in all the world. She had to come into mind.
Have you ever heard my Bogart?
No.
If you don't get on that plane, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, and maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life. What do you think?
That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's the beginning of a beautiful relationship. So many great classic lines. Really capturing the conflicting emotions around World War II, because they kept going around and around about how to end it, and they made it a sort of a patriotic ending, so to promote the war, and maybe that was ultimately the only ending they could in the time place. But I mean, just brilliant, beautifully cast, beautifully located. I liked all of Bogart's characters from that time period. His film noir characters, his other ones. I always remember the line, and when he's playing one of the detective, the Sam Spade character, where he says that he spends long nights weeping about it, talking, mocking someone, trying to be. I've used that line repeatedly. That I've used the tactical strategy where he pretends to be very concerned about money and other things in Maltese Falcon in order to get to a certain place. Makes a great argument about torture. You got to push me just hard enough that I spiel, but not so hard that I break and don't tell you anything. I mean, just tons of great wisdom. The line where he with Bacall, where they first met on set, where he has her walk around and says, "What do you see?" in the no strings attached. That's sort of kind of my ideal of living life. So great. I love all those films.
Sam Spade, A Maltese Falcon is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think the line you were referencing is, "Oh, sure, I'll have a few rotten nights when I send you over, but that'll pass."
Yeah, that was a great one too. He has another one in another one of the Marlowe characters when he plays Marlowe. I think in maybe The Big Sleep.
Yeah, The Big Sleep. Howard Hawks.
Where he says, "I'll spend long nights crying about it" when somebody's like ragging him. But yeah, that was great. I hope they don't hang you for that sweet neck, honey. Was another great line. The
Doomcock, all that I know is that your impersonation sounds good to me because it sounds like the guy who did it in The Simpsons, making fun of it. I've never seen Casablanca. I've only seen my reference of Casablanca comes from The Simpsons before The Simpsons got ruined by.
That's Casablanca's a must. Maltese Falcon's a must. Big Sleep's a must. Key Largo. All the good film noir stuff is just top notch.
When we were growing up, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids, our parents used to torture us on New Year's by making us watch old movies, and they got us to watch Citizen Kane one year. But
great film. Great film.
No, it was great. Maybe not when you're like an 8-year-old, but I think we tuned out of all these other ones.
You don't understand Rosebud. But, I mean, hey, you think that's on your? My dad was giving me what's that science fiction movie where they go out to space where the computer takes over?
2001.
Yeah. Well, when I was like when I was a kid. He gave it to me when I was like 7 years old, and I was like, "I'm supposed to understand what this is," and he was like disappointed. I was like, "I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what this is. Just be scared of space, I guess." But yeah, my dad was the same way. He had all these crazy sci-fi movies. He loved Star Trek, the old Star Trek. He lived off of that. He would be horrified by witnessing what's happening today, and that's what's so sad and shocking. The damage. I mean, it's one thing if they wanted to create their own crappy canon of garbage. It's another thing to go in and contaminate and torch the original canon. These guys they're just cultural Maoists. They're trying to find the Buddha statues to pull down and beat up. They're trying to find the old guy who still believes and beat him up. I mean, they had 5-year-olds who tortured teachers, their own teachers. People should go back and study, because in China they don't. They pretend that part of their history doesn't exist. Yeah, the history of the Cultural Revolution under Mao.
The internet in there doesn't allow you to search certain things any more than the internet here allows you to make videos on certain things. It's an amazing thing how that censorship can allow you to erase a part of history or not allow you to discuss it.
Well, look at South Park. They had to censor their show, and their show was not only all of South Park banned from China forever, and large parts of what they did when they just said, look at how China's dictating Hollywood policy right here, made a single show about it. Large parts of it have been edited out and have never been rebroadcast. But here in the States, that's how insane we've got. Of all the things that South Park's done that's so offensive, exposing Chinese censorship turned out to be the most offensive.
Right. Well, Scientologists might disagree with you when they revealed the ultimate secret of Scientology, the whole Zimu thing that Scientologists spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of auditing to get to.
I mean, Scientology was a beautiful scam, but it's got a lot of deep influence in Hollywood. People would be shocked at the people that are connected still to Scientology. I never remember. I went into some little Scientology shop in Florida. I didn't know it was a Scientology shop. So it was a personality place. And I'm taking this personality test, and I'm like, hold on a second. It doesn't matter which answer you give. If you're introverted, that's bad. If you're extroverted, that's bad. I was like, this whole thing's a scam. And I started explaining how it was a scam to the guy giving me the quiz, and he was heartbroken. It was like I'd shattered his whole universe. I started feeling bad for him. I was like, okay, don't worry about it, buddy. Because he was a true believer, little young Scientologist who thought he'd rediscovered the science of personality. I mean, you got to give L. Ron Hubbard credit. He took esoteric belief systems, science fiction, pop psychology, and used car salesman techniques, all popular in the 1950s, blended them together into a religion. I mean, just an insane religion. I mean, you study that, and it's like, whoa, you believe what? I mean, there's some crazy beliefs you can argue about in other religions. Nothing gets close to topping Scientology. That stuff is off the charts.
It was well executed by a pulp writer. He said he was going to set out to make a religion, and by God, he did. And it was.
For all the Scientologists out there, if you want to troll me or hate me, you have to go to Viva Barnes Locals.com. Otherwise, I won't read your trolling statements.
That's right. I got to get on Locals too, by the way.
Absolutely.
I've been totally distracted and constantly knocked off kilter on all sides. I'm a one-man operation on top of an empire, and it's driving me crazy, but I will get to it. Actually, I will. I'll be in touch with you about that for some more advice on that. But Nicholas Horton with the 3-pound super sticker is saying, how's it going? You tell me, Nicholas, how is it going? Y'all having fun out there in the chat? I hope so. And holy shit, Crack of Doom just left their first super chat. And when somebody, to quote Humphrey Bogart, when somebody leaves you a super chat, that's his first one, you're supposed to do something about it. Doesn't matter where you are in the show. It's your first super chat, and you're supposed to do something about it. If you don't, it's bad for YouTubers everywhere. And so, Crack of Doom with
one of my favorite lines of his, especially when he's driven to the edge. And he doesn't really, he's a guy who doesn't want to get involved, wants to stay out, wants to just live his life. But when he sees a certain kind of evil, he has to step in because he doesn't have a choice. And it's based on friendship and human relationships. It's what John Le Carre and others have pushed. I always understood as John Le Carre, but apparently pronunciated Le Carre. That's why that's a fantastic line. That was a true canon of good values and virtues to teach your kids, or almost any film with Bogart in it.
But Doomcock, you appreciate it. Crack of Doom just meant Doomcock, and that's that could be one heck of an evening party.
I don't know. Maybe Crack of Doom is future Mrs. Doomcock or something. Oh no, I'm just kidding. Crack of Doom with $5 Canadian super chat says, labels are the refuge of people without reasoned argument. Great show and guests. Thank you, Crack of Doom. I am deeply honored to have received your first super chat. Thank you for permitting me to goof around a little bit. I'm sure. I imagine you're a man and not a woman, but it was just a irresistible little jest. But thank you, Crack of Doom, sincerely. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And Viva, man, you've got to see some Casablanca. You got to see.
It'll be on my. I want to go back to some classics with my kids, so I'm thinking Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and then Casablanca in that order.
Well, those are great films. I mean,
I know. I'm just joking about not watching the uber violent ones with my kids. They're not old enough just yet.
Well, I didn't think so, but I wasn't going to judge you because I don't do that. I don't virtue signal by saying, "Oh, you're parenting like that, are you?"
No, like filthy humor. I don't have any limit for, but I did notice. I tried to watch The Matrix with the 3 kids, and one of them didn't much like. One of them was taken aback by the violence, which I didn't even consider to be violent. That's how the thresholds of the standards of a child. What scares a kid is different than what scares an adult. But the dirty humor, I have no barriers on in this house.
That's excellent.
Well, I saw Pulp Fiction in Madison, and I'll never forget when they said, "Bring out the imp." The whole crowd laughed, and I was like, "I'm in a different crowd. I was in the right crowd to watch Pulp Fiction."
The gimp's asleep. Well, you better go wake him up, shouldn't you? It's like.
Yep.
There are people who are born now that haven't seen Pulp Fiction, and that blows my mind. Pulp Fiction, that's another movie back in the day when people did not see race, and it was actually unifying. Even what was unifying then has become offensive now, and what's unifying now is actually totally divisive. Let that sink in.
I mean, and Tarantino was like the Picasso of movie directors. I remember arguing with a film student where they were going on and on about, "Oh, he's stolen from this and he's stolen from that." And I'm like, precisely. I mean, that's what Picasso said. Picasso said a great artist is a great thief. And the greatest compliment you can give someone is to steal their materials. And so I thought, Tarantino was sort of the last of the old school directors. Probably couldn't make some of those films today.
No, God, no, none of them. None of them. There's stuff to get you canceled in every single one of them, and that's one of the reasons why I love them, other than the fact that they're just brilliant pieces of cinema. Reservoir Dogs, start to finish, is just an intense thrill ride that filled me with envy at the time. I wish I had made it. It's just...
Have you seen Tarantino give sort of a description of aspects of that conversation from Reservoir Dogs? He's in another film where he's just doing a little cameo, and his interpretation of Top Gun, that Top Gun is basically just a long homoerotic story in disguise.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's just genius. Tarantino actually grew up partially in East Tennessee, up in Knoxville. That's why he keeps placing characters in Knoxville in his films. So he's got a little bit of East Tennessee on him. Wouldn't eat anything but a Big Mac the whole time he was like 3 years old. He refused anything except that's why he's got all the stuff about Big Macs and fast food.
Big Mac.
Second, Big Mac, yeah.
Royale with cheese. That's right.
That's it.
Royale with cheese. I love Tarantino unreservedly. I think he's fantastic. Michael Allen with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Michael. Says LA needs you to help ruin that loser DA. So he's talking to one of you lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, though. Sometimes I play one on TV.
The case that I have currently in the civil rights case I was talking about at the beginning of the show, where they're trying to basically screw over a single mom and her kid by lying to me and doing a sham settlement, is based in LA. It's people that are on the gang task force. They're small town cops, city of Fontana, who raided a home in the city of Cudahy outside of their jurisdiction. And they raided the completely wrong home. And then they're now trying to cover it up all the rest. And it's because they're on this sort of, gang force, task force, all those guys, uber macho, over aggressive, a lot of times don't know what the heck they're doing, get caught, try to cover it up. But that's sort of in LA's backyard. So we'll see what some of the LA, because I think some of their activities may have been criminal and may be looking at that possibility. So particularly if this turned out to be a sham settlement as well, it means they're covering up deeper, darker, dirtier activities. So yeah, I occasionally dip my toe back into LA where and when I can. The DA is not an impressive individual in LA, but to be honest, none of them have ever been impressive in my experience. It's only their degree of corruption and their motivation for the corruption. That's it.
Well, there you go, Michael Allen. Thank you for that super chat. And Philip J.Y. is giving us a super sticker of a happy, smiling face, looking very excited, which is really what my face looks like right now, if you could see it. And Michael Dufour with a $5 Canadian super chat. Marcel, excuse me, not Michael. Marcel Dufour with a $5 Canadian super chat says, as a cigar man myself, Barnes, could you recommend a great mid-price point cigar? Mine to you would be a Canadian cigar called Dominion. Thank you.
I wonder if that's, I assume that's sincere, but that sounds like potentially a sarcastic joke.
No, I think he's serious.
Yeah, just because there's a particular Canadian company named Dominion that some people think had an interesting influence in fortifying the election. But maybe it's an actual Canadian cigar. I've been to Canada. The only Canadian cigars I have is in Toronto. They actually get Cuban leaf for decades that they make into their own Canadian cigar, but it's made with Cuban leaf. You get to take a tour of the facility. Fantastic, top-notch place. But the last time I was there was maybe 7-8 years ago, maybe longer.
You're not coming back for a little while, Robert. I'll tell you that much.
Apparently not. I have to sneak in. I want to get into Canada. I got to sneak in. I got to sneak in across the border and sneak out of there. They got cop stations everywhere, and I can't pretend to be a tourist like that poor sap earlier in the year who was trying to, pretend to be,
the person that was going from the States saying they were going to Alaska and took a little pit stop in British Columbia, or where was it? It was at one of the resorts, and apparently, Robert, do we know what happened? Did they ever face the massive fine? I'm gonna have to look into it.
How much of was it? Like 75? It was some crazy amount.
No, the maximum fine is up to $750,000. Doomcock, just so you know, we have a quarantine act, and it means that you have to follow whatever the quarantine officers say. And people who are going from mainland America to Alaska are allowed to pass through Canada if that's what they're doing, but they got to go beeline and respect quarantine measures while they do it. This person went to Banff Resort and apparently was taking the scenic route to Alaska and had received a warning to quarantine in the hotel on their way, but was seen at another tourist spot a day later or later that day, arrested, big time stuff, but we don't know what happened to them. I'm gonna have to
an
update.
Canada's insane. But for, almost like the one I have right now is a San Cristobal. A lot of the San Cristobal are good. That are usually, some of those are medium priced. The other, but almost any Tatuaje or My Father cigar is good, and most of them are pretty reasonably priced. For a non-Cuban cigar. If you're in Canada, almost any Cuban cigar will be a good cigar. I mean, as long as you get it at a cigar shop, so that it's not a knockoff or bogus one. Almost all of them will be, but they usually price them pretty expensively. That's the hard part. So if you want a reasonably, like a $10 cigar, then My Father or Tatuaje are made by some of the best cigar makers in the world, and they make a lot of fairly priced. It depends on how spicy you want them. I mean, if you want weaker cigars, any kind of Davidoff, though those can be pricey, a little bit trickier to get in. There's a few others that are made with the Connecticut wrapper. Those can be kind of more moderate in nature. But generally, the inexpensive cigars I get are usually My Father or Tatuaje.
Fair enough. And just to let you know, it was not a trolling question. Several people in the chat, and the chat always knows everything. They've Googled Dominion cigars, and indeed they are up there in Canada. So he was sincere in his question.
Fascinating.
Eric Winberg with a $2 super chat. Thank you. Eric says, "Hail Overlord, Viva and Barnes in chat." Hail to you, Eric Winberg, and thank you, sir, for your support. Kiki Hideout with a $20 Mexican super chat. Thank you, Kiki Hideout. Says, "Get ready for more convenient Me Too allegations." Always ready for Me Too allegations. Absolutely. You'd be a fool not to, man. Never leave the house with your umbrella on a cloudy day. Don't go on Twitter unless you're ready to be pound Me Too'd. Hydonymous Rex with a $10 Canadian super chat. Thank you, Hydonymous Rex. Says, "Sorry, I'm in the field training right now." He's in the Canadian military. "I'll try to listen, but I might get pulled away at any moment. Cheers, boys." Cheers to you, and thank you for your service, Hydonymous Rex. And Tue with a £5 super chat. Thank you, Tue. Says, "The left don't want to fix racism. Poverty and social division are how the left get elected. They will never do anything to end them." Well, again, I try not to have, those kinds of divisions. I try to be a unifier. However, there are definitely elements of the left that do, in fact, adhere to that. I think we can all agree on that. I think that's pretty clear. But would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to pick a few politicians. That you could find some on the right as well who seek to divide, but no, it's identity politics is divisive politics, period. And it's the way Jagmeet Singh for the NDP now, if anybody who's from Canada knows what I'm saying, Trudeau has been doing it from day one. You just call people racist. You just make everybody focus on political identity, political issues, identity issues. And it's how you get people to fight among each other. And it's how you get everyone to feel hard done by, feel wronged, and look for someone to blame. And Trudeau and our politicians have no shortage of people they look to blame.
It's a shame. It is definitely a shame. And Pilgrim Media with a $2 super chat. Hail to thee, Pilgrim. Says politics is downstream from culture. A Breitbart.
That's right. It's deeply, deeply true. I mean, I started studying Gamergate because I was trying to figure out the 2016 election for betting purposes, not having a personal rooting interest at the time. And I was fascinated by this whole, the Donald Reddit, these memers, these YouTubers that were getting involved in politics who had never been when I looked at them, I was like, these are guys who would have been likely Democrats or non-political just a few years before. And yet here they're being politically active, politically aggressive, creating their own community, their own method and means of communication, using alternative technologies to achieve it and attain it. And I was like, where did this come from? Like tomorrow on Sidebar, we're going to be interviewing Razor Fist. And that's a guy that prior to 2016, you won't find any political commentary. You'll find about 10 years of rants about everything from Michael Jackson to the greatness of the movie Cobra and Dirty Harry films, and games and a bunch of other stuff. But you won't find almost anything on politics. And this was, Sargon of Akkad, who became famous and prominent in this space, totally apolitical prior to all the Gamergate nonsense. A lot of people were apolitical prior to that happening. Your comrades in the cause, people like Nerdrotic, people like Geeks and Gamers, people like Ryan, the people like Babyface, although that crowd mostly were people that would naturally be apolitical in, say, 2010. And yet they became aggressively political because politics is downstream from culture. What was happening in Hollywood, I mean, Nerdrotic saw it first in comics. All of a sudden, crap comics were getting made. And then the gamers saw it in gaming, though mostly it was just about corruption more than it was politics. But politics became the pretext for the corruption, to cover up the corruption. And it was a sign of the culture war that was coming. And that culture war was going to become political, already was, but people just didn't see it yet. And I mean, how do you have a whole generation of people who believe things that are crazy? Like the number of people open to the idea of the state running the world, which is what communism is, just a different form of fascism. Totalitarianism is what they both share in common. How do you have a whole generation who believe this? How do you have a whole generation of people who believe that cops are out there trying to shoot black people for fun? How do you have people believe things that are just crazy, that are empirically false, that you can prove are empirically false? Doesn't mean there aren't problems, but just not what they believe. I mean, it's someone who's a lawyer on the front lines of this, who believe things that women are discriminated against and not paid equally, not understanding if that was true, I and a bunch of lawyers would be suing anywhere, everywhere, all the time. And yet believe these things. It's because they've been watching it on TV. They've been watching it in films. They've been reading it in comic books. They've been seeing it in their social media. Politics starts with culture. It doesn't finish with culture. So if you want to change the politics, you need to change the culture.
And that's what I'm trying to do. But I tell you what, Viva, Robert, you guys are an endangered species because, fundamentally, I think the law is based on reason. And reason is a very devalued value these days. It's a damn shame.
People have forgotten, first of all, how to think critically. If they ever knew it, I think a lot of people are not being trained to think critically. They're being trained to think emotionally, which is the antithesis of critical thought. It's emotional thought, which has its place, but not in the context of critical debate that needs to be fact-oriented and not emotion-oriented. And the idea that politics is downstream from culture, I look at opportunistic politicians who are of questionable intelligence or of questionable pedigree all too often, who see this as the indication of what they have to adopt by way of ideology in order to be successful among the masses. Just look what's popular and then start to replicate it, and you'll get the masses behind you. It's a very dirty river, so to speak, that they are downstream in. And to change it, but you got to swim upstream, and you got to try to bring a bunch of fish with you.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. It's such a joy hanging out with you guys. I'm having a blast. I hope everyone else is too. M. Levine with a $20 super sticker of the Cheshire Cat in invisible mode. I can't see anything, but I know it's there and it's grinning at me. And I thank you very much, M. Levine, for that super chat. It's very kind of you. And TJF Denver with a $2 super sticker of a pear, just kind of shyly giggling and smiling. And I appreciate that very much, TJF Denver. That's very kind of you. Perpetual Punster with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Perpetual One. Is more direct. He just says, preach on, Brother Barnes. Preach on. So you guys are making a impression here. Rambam 3000 with a £5 super chat. Thank you, Rambam. Are you related to Pebbles or Bam Bam? Says Trotsky invented the term racism in its modern sense when he damned the Slavs for voting in their own interests, not in the correct collectivist fashion. Well, that's an interesting point, Rambam 3000, because a lot of the tenets of this Disney training are skewing away from such values as individuality and towards compliance, towards not questioning, towards basically Orwell's 1984, which is not really a model of society as far as I'm concerned. Any comment on Trotsky before we move on, guys?
Oh, no, I was just going to say the idea of not respecting individual critical thought. I mean, it's exactly what you see in the treatment of the apostates, the people who have changed their beliefs, or the people who do not toe the traditional line. Immediate demonizing of the individual in the most reprehensible terms. And the most recent example is Tim Scott. It is again just par for the course. They were, the idea that you'll respect and protect the vulnerable minorities until they dare say something that does not go along with what the protectors want or believe. And then it becomes an immediate demonize that individual who dare defy the consensus among the protectors. And Tim Scott's the greatest example, and the absence of a backlash against what was done to him is more indicative of a problem than what was actually done to him, in my humble opinion.
Well said, sir. Well said. And Gerald Quaglia with a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Gerald. Says the true racists are the ones that see racism everywhere. Yes, and in constantly calling it out, they are perpetuating it. And that is something that really the Expanse did not do. And I think, you should be the change that you want to have. And the Expanse is it. The Orville the same way. They never call out, issues of sex, gender, homosexuality, race. They simply present Bordas and Clyden as a two male couple, and nothing is ever said of it. And that's the way to deal with it. Show the world that you want, a world without prejudice, without hatred. Be that change, and maybe, just maybe, you'll change some hearts and minds along the way. Jimmy Luke with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. Says, all hail Lord Doomcock. Let's get the likes going early. They are up. My God, we've got 1,810 likes, gentlemen.
That's an amazing ratio for 2,600 watching. That, my goodness, Doomcock. I'm actually a little jealous now.
These guys are the best, man. And listen, I'm sure this is the first of many appearances I'll have on your channel. You'll have on mine, and it'll all average out in the end. And I just enjoying talking to you guys so damn much. I can't tell you. Dr. Cataclysm with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Doctor. Says, how much of this do you think Iger knew about? Seems to me that a communistic approach would undermine his supposed efforts to make a profit. Well, the presence of Kathleen Kennedy all these years belies that notion that Disney is a for-profit company. They say they are, but I just wonder what the hell, where are the investors? Why are the investors not looking into this, and why it's been a steady decline in box office for Star Wars? And I do not understand the mentality of investors. I don't play the stock market, but I'd be mad as hell. Wouldn't you guys?
Well, one investor called in cussing about, I think when he crossed the Rubicon, for people who don't know, Bob Iger has presidential ambitions. So he thinks he's a few. These guys, and that's the thing that's shocking about Hollywood. I think it's a bifurcated reality. For many of them, they care far more, definitely the people who are writing the scripts, care far more about power than they do about money. They don't care really at all about money, except to the extent they may be shocked someday and have none. Then they might suddenly care. But they're that kind of mindset and mentality. Sort of like late 60s rebels, but of a different variety. The other is there's a fair number who still are in denial. I mean, I think the people at BBC really thought a woke Doctor Who would be popular, not that it might kill the franchise overnight. I think that Kathleen Kennedy I think Bob Iger really believed at some level that would be actually successful, popular rebranding where he wouldn't have to give big royalty payments to Lucas for the prior characters. I think there was a part of him that really did believe that, but he was just ridiculously naive. I don't think he would have spent the money on the park that he did if he realized, oh, people are going to hate the crap I'm putting out. People are going to despise this so much they're not going to want to come to the park at all. I think there's part of him that did not realize that. That's why I think the war you've been talking about behind the scenes between Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy is real, because at some point Disney is a big corporation. I mean, Walt Disney himself was sure no wokester if you dig into old Walt's history. But so I think at some level, and there were angry investors who called in because with firing Gina Carano crossed the line. You're going to pretend to be supporting feminism and women involvement in one of the most popular badass women characters since Linda Hamilton in Terminator. You're going to fire her. I mean, when she's very, very likable across a broad political spectrum, massive, massive, massive mistake. And I mean, not only they start bleeding subscribers on Disney Plus, they started getting real, like some of the stock investors called in and said, why in the world did you do this? And they had a bogus excuse, but you could tell the blowback exceeded what they expected. Kathleen Kennedy thought she would get all the political protection she needed. This would be her way to drive out Jon Favreau, and instead it completely backfired on her. And I mean, I'm sure I understand why she's enraged at what happened at the end of The Last Mandalorian, without spoiling it for anybody out there, like I have a tendency to do. Because I'll spoil this part for the movie Unforgiven. I was sitting there with a buddy of mine, and a buddy of mine, he was African-American from New York. He was my roommate at Yale, and he was complaining. He was like, look, if you really study, they keep killing off the black character first in a lot of these kind of films. And he hadn't seen Unforgiven yet. I was like, man, I guess you're kind of right. That's what they do in Unforgiven. And he never forgave me for telling me. He's like, I didn't see the film. I was like, well, now you know who gets it first. But the dynamic of it, I think a lot of these, I think there is denial. There's real denial. Just like there was sort of with Trump's election. There was denial about this is really unpopular, our ideas. I mean, there was a recent big study that Yale lefties are pushing to everybody saying, hey, by the way, nobody likes this wokeism, including the African Americans and Latinos you're claiming to do it in favor of. They don't like it. They hate it. They rebel against it. They won't support it. And why are they having to do these studies? Because people have embubbled themselves so much that they've convinced themselves of their own delusions. And this is the way a good liar operates. A good liar convinces themselves of their own lies so well that they can repeat those lies to others. The problem is it runs into empirical reality. It collapses overnight when it has to face that. And I think that's where the best resistance is not only what you're doing, but what the audience is doing in pushing back publicly, pushing back with their dollars, pushing back with their eyeballs against this. And sooner or later, there'll be enough people who hear that that's the only way to push back against this cultural revolution, to have a real resistance that can strike back against the empire.
We have to. And by the way, Unforgiven is one of my favorite movies of all time. Viva, have you seen Unforgiven?
The original one?
Well, no, the Clint Eastwood.
The Clint Eastwood one. The one where
no, I haven't seen the original. I think I saw the one. There was one that came out.
Burt Lancaster.
Lou Diamond Phillip, was he? Which one was he in?
Oh,
Tombstone, maybe?
I might be mixing up the Westerns, yes.
No, Unforgiven is a masterpiece.
Unforgiven is the greatest Western of all time.
I agree. I've said this many times. Well, it's close to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah,
and High Noon is a great.
Oh, yes.
Someone just spoiled it in the chat. They said that he doesn't get forgiven at the end. So what do I need to watch it for now?
Well,
because, what's the line? Can you do Clint Eastwood?
Yeah. It's like his line was one of my favorite lines in that movie is, yeah, I've killed women and children. I've killed just about everything that walked or crawled on this earth at one point or another. And I come to kill you, little Bill, for what you've done to Ned.
Exactly.
I love that movie.
That was fantastic. And then hold on. Well, I think his line is, what is it? Justice or something. Justice ain't got nothing to do with it.
No. He said, well, I guess it had it coming. We all got it coming, kid. And when little Bill's on the ground and he says, "I don't deserve this. I was building a house," and he says, "Deserves got nothing to do with it."
Exactly. Which is fantastic. And then what he tells I love what he tells the media guy who's trying to do the bogus biography or the yellow press biography. And he goes, "Oh, did you shoot so-and-so in what order? Did you shoot so-and-so first?" And, Eastwood turns to him and says, "The question is, who am I going to shoot last?" That little guy swirls out of the back of the, it's like the media needs more of that.
Absolutely. I love when little Bill in that final scene, Viva, says, "You just shot an unarmed man." And Clint Eastwood says, "He should have armed himself if he was going to decorate his saloon with my friend."
With my dead friend. Oh, it was great. Fantastic.
I only know that I get these references only in respect of what I've seen parodied in The Simpsons or Family Guy or other movies. That's where I get my knowledge of older stuff from when I used to watch those shows.
Dude, I'm going to make you a little list and I'll send it to you of movies that you must see. I mean, for your own good, for your own soul. You got to see these movies.
Because I got to tell you, I got to break away from the real world news crap that's been going on. It's getting boring and it's getting overwhelming. So a good, meaningful, artistic distraction I'd be up for.
Absolutely. Well, I'm your man for that. Also, Robert knows we're eerily similar. We're eerily similar.
Right, yeah, but Robert gives me homework. So Robert sends me links for lawsuits, and there I spend the better part of the weekend watching that. Doomcock, you send me some movies. Robert, I get my movie references from Robert anyhow, so I'll work on both of them.
I will. Well, when we're in accord, chances are we're right. I mean, when there's consensus between us two individuals, you should take it seriously.
And I think it's one of the great roles you guys play is directing people's attention to what's good and bad out there in the cultural space, because you can't get honest, independent information from the so-called gatekeepers in the cultural world. And and so knowing what to stay away from. I mean, it's sad what they did with the new Captain America series. Was it Falcon and the whatever? I mean, they just, they had to even ruin it. I mean, they just can't help themselves but ruin it. But I like to know that in advance so I don't get stuck watching it. I hate it when Promising Young Woman. Don't watch it. Crap film. I'm going to spoil it right now. They kill the lead character. They kill her off. That's a crap film. I mean, it was so obsessed with being woke that they took a great revenge film, a really interesting, fun, dynamic, unique revenge film, and completely ruined it just so they could say, "See, the man got his in the end." It's like, no, I don't want to see the lead character dead and murdered. No.
Yeah, other than unless Hitchcock does it in Psycho, which it was brilliant, but that was revolutionary.
That movie I've seen, and I even saw the explanation as to how they made the sound effects and stuff.
Beautiful,
that was beautiful.
Do you know who wrote the score, Viva, to Psycho?
Why, yes, I do.
Who was it?
Rachmaninoff? No, I have no idea. I just couldn't even think of a good joke fast enough.
I was just throwing it out. I just plumbing the depths. Robert, do you know who wrote the score?
No idea. I have a buddy of mine that did the scores to Damages in Game of Thrones, and another one that did the score to the show The Practice, and some other ones. But that's the extent of my knowledge of who has conducted various. And I recognize certain people. Like what was that? The movie where they go into people's minds starts with an I.
Inception. That was
Inception.
Hans
that
Zimmer.
guy's great, like Hans whatever another.
Zimmer.
That guy. And then I saw a documentary on another great, fascinating guy, but I don't remember any of their names.
Okay, I was just wondering if you guys liked film soundtracks, because I'm obsessed with them. But never mind. That's a digression.
My favorite all-time soundtrack is still from The Great Gatsby, just because not the one with Leonardo DiCaprio. I listened to that the entire summer. I could listen to that over and over because it was perfect for the mood.
Soundtrack.
It is, man. I love writing to Inception. Inception. That's a brilliant score.
Yes,
absolutely brilliant.
It makes the film really. I mean, without it, the film doesn't work nearly the same way.
I agree entirely. Adam Wofford with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Adam. Says, if you look at the art from the USSR, what it's all about, and for the state, and not about the person's emotions or expression of the moment of the heart, but instead it is of that time period and forever it is. Yeah, did the USSR create any art? If so, it was underground art. It wasn't.
I mean, really, just art. I mean, other than the posters, the sort of over the top posters could be iconic. I mean, not really great art necessarily, but could be iconic. But other than that, the Nazis were very good at public display of power and uniform of image. But like, name a film that that people would say is that would had as an interesting storyline. Even I mean, it's just not there because it's impossible to convert effective film into propaganda. If it's propaganda, it's going to be bad art almost every time. It's the rare film that can be an effective political message and an effective story that is universal. I mean, it's what either Faulkner or Hunter Thompson or both said. I may have been Faulkner, and then Thompson always quoted him, that to be able to see the world in a grain of sand is the true genius of great art. And what these people do is all they can see is the sand. They can't see the world. And that's why it's awful and atrocious art.
I agree. They're not terribly abstract thinking, and they don't have any kind of aesthetic background other than the political, which is really soul destroying. Jonathan with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Jonathan. Says Bad Batch, Clone Wars, and Mandalorian lead by example of how you do storytelling and where Disney should be going. Yes, sir. All of them from the Favreau camp, because, again, they do not view Star Wars as a platform for political change. They view it as a narrative and as mythology, and they approach it with reverence, and that's what we need more of in pop culture these days. Boz Bundalo with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Boz. Says same thing with Kevin Feige. Being for social justice and diversity, telling everyone they should denounce their white privilege, he should simply step down and let a woman or minority take his spot. Yes, absolutely. Same thing with Captain Marvel. Brie Larson actually stole that role away from the original Captain Marvel, who was Monica Rambeau, who was a black woman. But she's not giving up her part for social equity. So I don't know. Maybe it's just empty virtue signaling, you think? IWD with a $5 super chat. Thank you, my friend. Says identity politics seems like a rebrand of the old white man's burden concept. Yeah, meet the old new boss, same as the old boss, as the Who used to say. Well said, IWD. Pretty damn much. Point Curation with a $10 Canadian super chat. Thank you, oh pointed one. Says, hail, speak your mind and say what you think is true. Stand up for yourself, even if the entire world demands you kneel. Develop art. Engage in tradition. Foster the healthy exchange of ideas and be well.
This is what people don't have. They've lost the ability to do. And I don't blame cancel culture. And I don't blame wokeism. I just blame the snowflake culture, or the protecting everyone from any form of adversity. People have lost the ability to disagree with a person without disagreeing with the person. And people cannot agree. I'm fixated on the Caitlyn Jenner transgender, athlete discussion. People have lost the ability to appreciate that individuals are multifaceted, will have many different opinions on many different subjects, and one can disagree with someone even on a subject that they hold near and dear to their identity without demonizing the identity of the other person. People have lost that ability. I'm going to blame social media, because when you have to reduce things to a tweet, a Facebook post, short snippets, it doesn't allow for nuance, and it doesn't allow for the nuance that is a human and the very detailed understanding that goes into interhuman relationships. And we've lost the ability to appreciate that, and we've also lost the ability to deal with critique in a way that allows us to have human discussion. Long-winded rant.
No, but it's well said, sir, and I agree with it entirely. That the death. Well, how can you even have a discourse? How can you even have a civilized discussion if you can't even agree that truth and facts matter? How can you have that when you can be condemned for taking a position, regardless of how justified you are?
So one of the super chats, I don't know if you can see it now, but said, what do you think of Seth Rogen throwing James Franco under the bus now? Because, the accusation's out, the reflex is in. There's no presumption of innocence anymore. There's a presumption of guilt. And, when I saw that chat, what I think my first reflex is that Seth Rogen has some dirty skeletons in the closet. And this is just the overcompensation to distract. Let's just overtly pounce on another for our own sins. That's the tendency I've seen. So I'm just waiting for Seth Rogen to have his own stories come out, because when you live a certain type of, when you do what Seth Rogen does in life, guaranteed you've behaved inappropriately at times. And it's just a matter of time before someone comes out with those accusations, and then everyone else has to throw Seth Rogen under the bus, and the cycle continues.
Well, we all have human foibles. It's called being human. And if you can be canceled by any of them at any time, then ultimately, isn't this, more than anything else, isn't this a form of thought control? Because what they are doing is they are making you have all these internal filters on your own thoughts, because the fear of being canceled is so great that you are afraid to say certain things because you might get canceled. But not only that, you're afraid to even think certain things, because then you might actually let them slip past your lips, and then you will be canceled as well. I think the ultimate solution to this is not giving a shit about these ants and just fucking living your life.
Well, it's one of the reasons why Trump was so popular in this sort of what I call pop culture movement, in the sense of the pop part of populist culture, sort of counter revolution that was taking place, was because it was clear Trump, was honey badger, didn't give a shit. He's like, he's going to say whatever, no matter what. And that was very appealing to people who've been dealing with this insanity for the last decade inside the culture wars. The second part is it sort of relates to the panopticon. The whole goal of self-censorship is to have a system that gets people to internalize the external reality the system tries to create. And this was Foucault's point about why do we have a modern system of prisons and mental health facilities that appear to be very poor at actually preventing crime or healing people in the mental health context? Because it appears we've designed a system that's about sending a broader and different message to the broader society. Also, of course, if you don't know crime, no police. So you justify police by creating a permanent criminal class. And so part of this sort of internal, it's what Noam Chomsky's point has been, that effectively the system's goal is to get you to self-censor, because that's a much more effective system. If you can acculturate people to only say certain things and repeat certain things and believe certain things and think about certain things and entertain certain things. And this goes back to Hollywood, late 60s, early 70s, where part of the left. There's a long history of Hollywood demonizing poor whites and blacks in American society from, say, throughout almost really all of its history. Still true of poor whites, erratically true with African Americans and Latinos, depending on the nature of the film. Though a lot of woke films are just racism in disguise. They're just dressed up a little differently, as Viva pointed out. But part of that was because these are groups that have historical alternative narratives that challenge the institutional narrative. If you grew up in a poor white community or African-American community, you're more skeptical of a lot of institutional narratives because of the stories your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents have told you. It's why politically ancestry matters. If you tell me who your great-great-grandfather was, I can likely predict your politics based on that fact alone better than any other fact. This is what Kevin Phillips pointed out in his book, Emerging Republican Majority, published back in the late 1960s. So I think that, that's a broader point and purpose of what's taking place, is a very form of thought control, mind control, and self-censorship. But as to Seth Rogen in particular, it reminds me of when Michael Moore had his own TV show, and he did a kind of a fake poll, but it might have been a real poll, that asked how many people would wish Dennis Hopper would go back on drugs. Because he was more interesting then. Seth Rogen, when I see this sort of pontificating, I'm like, I like Seth a lot better when he was doing pot every day. So go back to pot, go back to making pot films, and get off your political aggrandizing like you're somebody that's a worthy, moral virtue signaling preacher. Whatever Franco's problems are, let Franco deal with them on his own accord. Because the other thing Rogen is revealing, aside from sort of the great history of Canadian comedians being undermined by him becoming this political propagandizer, the way Jim Carrey's bad political art turned into, is this lack of loyalty. It's a common, the real value and virtue that's not reflected and not represented in mainstream Hollywood and mainstream elite culture today is any sense of belief in loyalty for its own sake. And it's a value that a lot of people hold dear, and it's a value that clearly Seth Rogen doesn't share.
No, I think it's just self-preservation to some extent also. I mean, it is lack of loyalty, but it's loyalty to the almighty dollar. Is everybody they do what they have to do in order to themselves maintain their relationships and not become the John Voights of Hollywood on the political sense, or, on the #MeToo sense. They've got to do it. Otherwise, they're going to get blacklisted. It's going to be guilt by association, violence through silence, and so on. And so it's all just self-preservation and selfishness, and not actually supporting any meaningful cause, in my humble opinion.
I think you're right. And I think that ultimately I like to get down to the roots of things, the root cause of things. And honestly, I can't think of a more important step that we could take to save democracy, save Western civilization, save the world, frankly, than to, by God, reintroduce critical thinking into the educational curriculum and emphasize it way over historical fact and mere data. Teach people how to think before you then give them data to think about. Could you guys agree with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what law school is supposed to be about. And I call it, if you want to improve your reasoning, change your motivation. And what law school is supposed to be good about is the best way to improve your reasoning is to shift your perspective. You're having to advocate, from this side, then from that side, then from that side. And by changing your motivation, your reasoning dramatically improves, and it reflects the Enlightenment value that critical thinking in an objective, independent manner based on facts and truth has its own value. And what is now that doesn't have a value in the modern woke left. That truth is a contamination. Truth is just power in disguise. It's sort of a misapplication of Derrida and to some extent Foucault. Treating, yes, language can be power, but that doesn't mean you can erase it and reduce it to nothingness solely as a tool and means of power. But that's what they've done. Rule of law is the same way. Rule of law is just some excuse and pretext for them to get the outcome they want now. There are people who don't believe in the rule of law, and they don't understand what that does for the broader society. That means that the only reason why the legal institutions have power is because they have moral authority based on the trust and confidence in their credibility and in intellectual integrity from the public. The moment they think it's all nothing but politics in disguise is the moment they have no moral authority anymore, and everybody can see the emperor has no clothes.
And this is what's happening in Canada with the police making very vigorous arrests of religious figures for holding service in violation of health measures. But law school teaches you to think critically. It also teaches you not to have thin skin. But I did philosophy for 4 years before law. I took a logic class. Everybody should take a logic class, because if you follow me on Twitter, I just tweeted out, like, one of the fundamental mistakes that people make in logic, especially when they're blinded by fear, from COVID, the fact that 3% of everybody who has died from COVID was in their 40s does not mean that if you're in your 40s, your chances of dying from COVID are 3%. People don't have the basic elements of logic to distinguish these very different things, which sound very similar, but taking it from statistics to any form of critical thought, just the ability to break things down, to actually adhere to meanings and definitions, so that you don't get into a discussion where words cease to have meanings. Discussion becomes impossible. And the classic example is racism typically meant prejudice based on some immutable feature. But then when that became socially unpopular, then it became definition of racism was that plus power. So therefore racism couldn't exist under certain circumstances. And once you start bastardizing words, you start depriving them of meaning. Discourse becomes impossible, but more important, understanding becomes impossible.
And likewise, if you are more concerned with virtue signaling over truth, then nuance completely goes out the window. And it's a damn shame, because to get at truth, nuance is essential. And, instead of projecting onto a speaker what you think he said so that you can pounce on him, listen to what the damn speaker said. I've had people, criticize my videos and stuff, clearly hadn't even watched them. They just assumed what I was going to say. And I'm a very, very nuanced person. I will very, very clearly say what I mean. And to just have somebody just discard that and say, oh, you're an ist or a phobe, I have nothing but contempt for that kind of mentality.
Well, I find it a universal theme in like the three most dissident opinions that I have with probably our own audience is whether OJ was innocent, whether how to view Putin and Russia, and third, whether Michael Jackson was innocent. And we'll be talking about that with Razor Fist on Wednesday, the Michael Jackson part. But what they all have in common is that when I discuss or debate it with someone, almost universally, they will have never read or reviewed the actual trial transcript in the OJ case, or the Michael Jackson case, and they will never listen to the like Putin's own statements. I was like, okay, if you're going to condemn a guy and hate a guy and believe something about a guy, that's fine. You may have your reasons for doing so. At least actually review what he has said. I mean, he does massive interviews all the time with hostile press almost every other week that you can go back 20 years to look at and review and then judge him and assess him. What always stands out, like I asked on our locals board, people that were critical of the Putin opinion, I was like, well, what are your sources for this? And what's fascinating is even the ones that had long sources, what was not listed is actually listening to Putin. And I was like, okay, if you're going to criticize someone, maybe you should pay attention to what they actually said. You can still do so, but they generally don't. It's the one thing that their sources are untrustworthy and unreliable. And they recognize this in other parts of their life. It was similar to watching the lockdowns and other things. Like some people's perceptions of Gina Carano initially, some people's, I mean, a wide range of topics. I mean, basically, if it's a controversial topic, look to Ben Shapiro's opinion because chances are it's initially wrong because that's almost a universal rule. So Benji Shapiro basically had this whole thing about Michael Jackson was clearly guilty and everyone knew it. I was like, obviously he hadn't listened or paid any attention to the trial.
There is benefit in, it's not because you can have an opinion that you have to have an opinion. There is benefit to, just being quiet on certain subjects. Like I go make an active effort, not even active, sorry. I do not take positions on certain things publicly because it's not because I can't have an opinion that I should have one on every subject. But when you position yourself as having an opinion on every important subject, then it has to come out. But the one thing I've noticed, Robert, and I see it with you, and I see it, when people criticize me, the flawed logic, the flawed reasoning pattern is the same on both sides of the spectrum. It just depends on whether or not it happens more often, with certain groups or certain channels than with others. Our subs and our followers are generally very smart, very critical. But you just see when people descend into this, and myself included, when people descend into flawed reasoning, they immediately descend into attacking motivations. They immediately descend into assuming motivations, and they immediately descend into straw manning and exaggerating or oversimplifying. And I do it myself, and you have to catch yourself when you're doing it. But I see with Rob, and they go after the person when they disagree with the idea. Robert on Russia is a very good example from our stream with George Samueli. Robert, I'm still getting emails on this thing about how you're wrong on Putin, and you might be, but one could be wrong without being dishonest. They could just be wrong. They could just believe something that is wrong, or you might be wrong and you might just disagree. But it's the same poor reasoning when people get into it and they defend into it. It's universal among humans. You just have to try to keep it in check and keep it in balance.
Yeah, and I would think that one of the important things is to be more committed to the truth than your own ego in your position. If somebody will go ahead and prove me wrong with an argument, for example, I made a very lengthy and very detailed video laying out the case that Deckard is a replicant in Blade Runner. And people just didn't like that. They hurt their fifis, or they didn't feel it, that it was truthy or something. Nobody, not one person has ever successfully rebutted the argument. They've just had emotional appeals and just said you're wrong, or you're wrong. And I don't respect that. But it's just kind of sad when people just rely on that sort of thing instead of actually arguing. If somebody would show me the light, I'm not going to reject that. I'm going to say, okay, fair enough.
Well, the other thing is, it's what we're taught in law is a certain process of thinking. That just as the artistic process has been contaminated, and that tells you you're not getting good art, you're getting politicized propaganda, you're getting things that people don't want, because the process itself, the hero's arc, has vanished from the narrative. The same capacity is true. Like, I'm going to be doing a barnstorming episode for our locals audience on the issue of a particular medicine that's being out and about right now, which we can't mention on YouTube, related to a particular virus, and whether or not it can be forced, and what would be the argument against it. And one of the arguments I'm going to say, if I was making a closing argument in court as to why it is this should not be mandated, large parts of it are purely process. That's going to be my arguments. My arguments are going to be purely that you can trust a particular kind of process. And if that process it's why we have due process. We believe in due process not for its own inherent sake. We believe in due process because we believe it has a higher probability of getting us to a truthful and morally just outcome. And when that process is, we see a lack of evidence of that process. And some of that is where we see cancel culture, that's a sign of a problematic belief structure. Where we see lack of debate, that's a sign of a problematic idea. Where we see people who don't have this any skin in the game promoting something, that's someone you shouldn't trust. That's where Nassim Taleb has done, well, I don't know, it's Nassim Taleb, I forget how you pronounce it, but that's where he's done brilliant work, and he's right. Not only the black swan aspects being underrated, but the lack of skin in the game is someone you cannot have confidence in. The same thing is true in a wide range of procedural contexts. So we should look and do it for ourselves. If we're making arguments based on we don't like the person, or we're resorting to adjectives rather than ideas or facts, then we should check ourselves and say, hold on a second, I've fallen into bad argumentation. I've fallen into bad. That's what he was talking about. My brother teaches logic, taught debate to me when I was a kid. They listen to yourself. And if you are using the certain terms and certain subjects and certain methods of phraseology, then you've already likely failed. You've failed in the argument. That doesn't mean you can't have fun now and then. But aside from just the fun and sarcasm and satire for its own sake, be aware of the nature of your argument and check yourself. And one aspect of that is check your sources. Where did I come up with this idea? Because I'm always intrigued, whether it's Putin or anything else. I'll say, where did you come to these beliefs? And people will dig in deep and they'll realize, oh, it's the same sources I completely distrust in almost everything else in life. So why exactly did I trust their sources then? Because I went through it. I was someone who believed certain things, went over to Russia, realized what I had been taught was wrong. And I was like, how did I get to this place where I believe things with certainty that now I can see are utterly empirically false? And I realized, man, I'm trusting the same sources I know are garbage. So I think that the same methods are important. And it's the same true with the artistic method. If it's a bad artistic method, chances are it's bad art. The motivation may be politics. The motivation may be to protect Dumb and Dumber, like the two incompetent rubes who ruined Game of Thrones. It could be a range of things. It could be because the author of Game of Thrones is too busy on his latest self-celebration tour to write his book, to finish the series. Whatever the motivation may be, but the process will tell you whether or not the outcome is good. This is what Nick Saban says in football. He says he doesn't worry about the outcome. He worries about the process. He says as long as the process is right, we'll get to the good outcome more often than not.
Well
said,
not
sir. Goals.
I've got to speed through these super chats here, but I did want to say something. It's germane to the points we just made. Someone in the chat just said to me, if Deckard was a replicant, why did he get his ass kicked by all the other replicants? Argument refuted. And I say, watch my damn video, because I already thought of that argument and I refuted it in the video, which was my statement. So just saying this shit doesn't help anything. Okay. I'm just saying, watch the video before you say you refute my argument. If you haven't watched my video, then you don't know what the F my argument is.
Now, Doomcock.
Yes.
I can tell by the noises upstairs that I am being summoned sooner than later, so I don't want to cut it short, but I may have to duck out in about a minute or two.
Absolutely, Viva. Listen, thank you guys. I was just going to press on with these super chats here just to see if there's anything, but I appreciate every moment that you guys spent here, and I've had a blast. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but let's press on here. Jay Galt 1776, Ashley Babbitt with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Jay Galt. Says, so conservatives are criticizing leftists with a term racism that was first weaponized by Trotsky. This is why we lose. We accept the premise. Well, Jay Galt, what I would say is that the reason that I don't even know that we are losing, but if we are losing, it's because of a lack of general critical thinking being taught in schools, which is just the death of democracy. If you don't have an informed populace, then you've got problems, and that's why we've got problems. I mean, these terms wouldn't be a problem if we could actually debate them and settle on what they mean.
I'll just say generally, first thing my brother taught me, he who sets the terms wins the debate.
That is true. But if you constantly will question the terms and force them to be redefined as a critical, thinker would in an actual debate that is fact based, we'd be a hell of a lot better off, all of us. MT with a $50 Australian super chat. Very generous of you, MT. Thank you, sir. says, Dictor, you are a legend. Well, thank you. Thank you for your efforts highlighting critical race theory. These policies truly make me fear for the future, and I can't thank you enough for trying to expose them to a broader audience. You are very welcome, MT. That is my mission, to save pop culture, and sometimes you have to get to the roots of these things in order to achieve that mission statement. Lord of the Eagles reaches with a 50 euro super chat. Thank you, oh Lord. Says critical thinking and reasoned reflection have been given over to safe spaces and speech's violence. Orwell is rolling in his grave. Yeah, safe spaces in colleges. Jesus Christ. If you go to college to have your own opinions reinforced, then save the money. Stay home.
College has become kindergarten. I mean, the idea that you have to have cry rooms. I'm not insensitive, but I teach my kids to not be sensitive to these things. When they're 18 to 21, they better not think that words are violence unless the words are explicit violence. Other than that, words are not violence.
Yes, and you don't need if you're going to be a snowflake, you're not going to make it in the larger world, because eventually reality has a way of catching up with you, even in your safe spaces.
If you're going to be a snowflake, you're not going to make it through summer, that's for sure.
And we're here, so we should enjoy it and not be snowflakes. Grand Wazoo 42 with a 10 euro super chat. Thank you, Grand Wazoo. Says, hail my liege. Great stream and guests. Yes, they are. Love this chat. Keep up the fight. Thank you, Grand Wazoo 42. We're going to do just that. Perpetual Punster with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Perpetual One. Says, I just reread Orwell's 1984 for the first time in 20 years. Our current society is far closer to what's in the novel than I remembered. Hollywood really is the ministry of love. Movie making 101. Yeah, Orwell, man. I mean, it hasn't proven to be quite as heavy-handed, as Orwell predicted. He had, spy screens in every home. Well, they aren't oppressive. They're called smartphones, and we all submit to their tyranny willingly for convenience. Sad. Solid Gamer 1998 with a $15 super chat. Very generous of you, sir. He says, hail. And I say, hail back. It's very good to see you, sir. And Talix001 with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Talix. Says, make women heroes great again. Like a long kiss goodnight. Oh, yeah, with Gina Davis. Great movie and great badass female hero. Did either of you ever see The Long Kiss Goodnight?
Yes, Gina Davis was my high school love.
Really?
I saw it multiple times because Samuel L. Jackson is from my hometown, Chattanooga. So I've seen pretty much everything that Sam's been in.
He is fantastic, isn't he?
Oh yes. God. I mean, and he has the way he says the MF word is just top notch. I mean, nobody says it as good as Sam.
He has made it his own. He should TM it. That's what he should do.
Exactly.
Meredith G with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Meredith. Says, think about the fact that Disney destroyed the female hero's journey when they gutted the Hans Christian Andersen Snow Queen to make Frozen. Yeah. Well, I mean, there is no female hero's journey anymore, gentlemen, because when you have a female in a movie like this, to imply that she has to have a hero's journey means that she wasn't the bestest ever to start with. And we can't have that, can we, guys?
Exactly. Sadly.
I saw Frozen, but I did not look at it through the that political perspective. I was only looking at whether or not it fit the story that apparently Elsa was in the closet. That was the story that I heard about the interpretation of it. That's how I watched it. I didn't see it, but
well, I haven't seen it, so I don't know anything about it. But I think Elsa's hot. I don't know.
With 3 kids, I watched that movie. I had that "Let It Go" song stuck in my head for flipping. It's going to be back in my head now. It's in my head now. I've just ruined the night.
Sorry, man. I don't even know that song, and I know every song under the sun, but I don't know that song because I haven't seen them. All I know is I think Elsa was hot. That's how shallow and toxic male I am. Soloso with a $9.99 super chat. Thank you, Soloso. Says, can we get Sabu and Harvey to chime in?
I hate all this identity politics and all this woke wankery, and I am not a snowflake. I melt snowflakes. In fact, Doomcock's name melts snowflakes at a distance of 30 feet. This is true. The mere mention of my name melts snowflakes. And there is Sabu, the prehistoric doom squirrel,
as well chiming in. Thank you, Soloso. And JBit89 with a $9.99 super chat. Thank you, JBit. Says, knowing how Stan Lee used his comic creations to unite the fans, do you think he would approve of the direction Marvel is taking currently? Hail Doomcock. Hail JBit89. Guys, I don't think that Stan Lee would stand for this at all. Stan Lee understood, just like Gene Roddenberry understood, just like Jonathan Swift understood, that to change hearts and minds, you've got to entertain hearts and minds, tell them a story, show them why they should feel this way, instead of lecturing them, berating them, and haranguing them. Do you agree with that?
100%. It's why no one's watching the Oscars. It's why people are tuning out of sports. It's why people are tuning out of anything that they were once interested in. It's gone from entertainment to preachy, what's the word? Condescending lecturing.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, if I want a sermon, I'll go to church. I don't want to watch it on my TV film or movie film.
And that's what we get, especially in times like these, where people are shut in and, the damn coof and everything else that's going on in the world. People just want to have a little bit of a break and have a little bit of damn fun. But that's too much to ask in this horrible, horrible environment that Hollywood has fostered. It's sad. Benjamin Brees with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Benjamin. Says, Finn could have been a good character, a stormtrooper switching sides, but they made him into a tag-along character with pointless side quests. They sure did. And boy, for a woke company, they sure did marginalize and shrink him on the poster for the Chinese market. Because, boy, I tell you, they're against racism until it impacts their profits. And then, they kind of play along. That's sad. DTCQC with a $5 Canadian super chat. Thank you, my friend. Says, other great movie recommendation, Country of Jones. I've never heard of this movie. Have either of you heard of Country of Jones? No. I'm sorry, DTQC. Well, that's a good recommendation since none of us have seen it. We'll
write it down.
We will take it into account. Country of Jones. Mr. Biggles. Hello, Biggles, with 100 ZARs. I don't know what ZARs are, but they sound exotic, and it's probably the first I've ever gotten of that. Thank you, Mr. Biggles. And there's 100 of them. And he says, absolutely quality discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. What are your thoughts on Invincible? Recently read the comic, but not seen the TV series. Comic was really well done. It just let the story unfold. Have either of you watched Invincible?
I have it on the list, but haven't started it yet.
It's okay. I mean, it's interesting. It's a kind of deconstruction of Superman, and it builds to a hell of a finale. I'll tell you guys that. If you want to watch a really kind of hard, cutting edge, cartoon that still has some idealism to it, I can recommend that. Hail to Mr. Biggles. And Crack of Doom with a $5 Canadian super chat. Oh, thank you. Oh, Cracked One says, labels are the refuge of people without reasoned argument. Great show and guests. I agree. You guys are great. You mind if I say that?
I never get tired of hearing it.
I will say it again and again. Marcel Dufour with a $5 Canadian super chat. Thank you, Marcel. Says, excellent show, everyone. Could each of you recommend a book that you have recently read? I need more knowledge. Gentlemen, Viva, have you recently read a book you can recommend?
I've read only the books that I've read for our Wednesday sidebars. J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy was beautiful.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, I'm reading books all the time. This one behind me here is about divination, so it's kind of fascinating. It has, the different theories that people have around the world of how patterns can have broader meanings, sort of Carl Jung's collective unconscious. So it had some fun, interesting intel and information in it.
I like that. I would recommend, recently read. I would recommend Alan Watts' book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are, which kind of goes along that line of divination, Robert, because, again, that Eastern philosophy that suggests that all divisions are illusory and that really it's all God just playing the many roles and props in this cosmic drama kind of explains why divination would work, because, synchronicity that Carl Jung discussed is actually more or less the stream of thought of the universe. And that's just a way to put that. You can reject that or think about that or think I'm a nut, but that's kind of a interesting, that's an interest of mine. I love Jung. I think he's fantastic. The Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey with a £2 super chat. Thank you, Hunky Chunky Funky One. Says, hail Doomcock. And I say, hail to you, oh great and powerful monkey. Tall Bald Ewok with a $5 super chat says, if you have not seen it, the old Thin Man movies are good. Viva. Have you seen the Thin Man?
No, I haven't seen the Thin Man. I'm just hearing dogs fighting upstairs.
Oh dear.
I don't know if you guys can hear it through the mic. Doomcock, I may have to. Now I hear a kid crying.
Oh God, we've got to let you go, man. We've got to let you go.
Doomcock, Robert, everyone in the chat, thank you very much. I'm going to go upstairs now and clean up a mess, I think.
Thank you, Viva Fry.
Bye,
please subscribe to Viva and Viva and Barnes. Robert, can you stick around a few more minutes?
Yeah, I can stick around. I got about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Awesome. And then I'll just go ahead and speed through the rest of these super chats without you guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate you both. Let me see if I can find a good question for you, Robert. Let's see. Oh, well, Gino X 1987 with a $5 Canadian super chat. Thank you, Gino X. Says, Snakes on a Plane is a modern day classic that deserves the credit it deserves. Were you a fan of Snakes on a Plane?
I like that just in the genre of like the 50-foot woman, I like those kind of over the top old drive-in style movies. So in that context, I did. I wouldn't recommend it universally, but in that context, yes.
Excellent. I've got a very specific super chat for you before you go. Andrew Sabina with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Andrew. Says, can Mr. Barnes speak at all on his recent case representing Kiwi Farms?
Oh, yeah. So that's still ongoing. I mean, what's happening is that there's a subpoena that they've issued that we believe that has not been properly issued. And so we're contesting it in Wisconsin court. And so that's sort of the scope of it currently. And so we're fighting the subpoena because of the way in which the subpoena was issued. And there's this tendency to, in the modern digital age, for parties to use the sort of broad access that technological companies have to go on fishing expeditions against third parties without their notice or knowledge in a meaningful way. And so those kind of cases that touch on those kind of legal issues are ones I get involved with because I find it disturbing their willingness and readiness to invade other people's privacy on the weakest of pretext for the broadest of fishing expeditions.
Yeah, that's horrible. And I'm really glad that there are sharp legal minds such as yours that we can, fall back on to save us from such dilemmas. Because otherwise, the average person would just be completely exposed and helpless.
Yes. No doubt.
And MT with another $10 super chat. Thank you, MT. Says Critical Theories is a book by Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay that contains a comprehensive analysis of critical theory. I cannot recommend it enough. Have you ever read that book?
Yes. In fact, we're going to have James Lindsay on a future sidebar coming up either in June or July. He has a very busy schedule, but he does by far the best job of breaking down the ideology and the language of critical theories and explaining both their source and their defenses and how to take them apart piece by piece.
That is outstanding. And I know you've got to go, Robert. I think that's a good note to end it on. Listen, thank you so much for being on the channel here today, man. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Always fantastic. And do it again.
Absolutely. Just next time, maybe on your channel, just shoot me a line anytime you want the future ruler of Earth to come up to the surface and hang out with you guys.
Fantastic.